למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל יתן למותך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל יתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. אוי אוי מקימי מעפר דל, מהשפות ירים אביון, אוי להושיבי עם נדיבי אמור, תבינאי נאי 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 תנאי נאי נאי תנאי נאי 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 נאי. כי השם אלוקינו המקביל לשבת, אוי בשמיים ובארץ, אוי מקימי מעפר דל, ירים אביון אוי להושיבי עם נדיבי יבוא
All right, Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to this week's World Alliance of Qara'im Torah study. I'm Hakham Melech ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, and let's dig right in. So today we are in Exodus chapter 13, 17. Again, as I often do, I'll go back a little bit for context. So we have some laws. First, regarding Pidyon Ben, the redemption of the firstborn. So we'll talk about this. Let me stop the music here. And let me share the screen. Oh, hello. Let's try that again. And let me share the screen differently. Window, Twitter. Oh, they're doing it different now. That's interesting. They do it below. Okay, good enough. Okay, so there we go. So now the screen is shared. First of all, welcome Maryanana Nana, my good friend who shall remain nameless, from the skydiving community / family, I guess you could even call it. Welcome Yardain and whoever else is here. Okay, so we are in Exodus chapter 13, 17. That's where we're going to start. We have to go today through from Exodus 13 through 13, 17 through. I just like saying through. I'll just say this for the next 5 hours. Okay. We have to go through Exodus 17, 16. So we've got about 4 chapters to cover. So an average size parsha, an average size reading for this week, but we'll get through it. So just to go back in context a little bit, right? Last week, so the laws of, chapter 12 is basically a lot of the laws of the first Passover. At the end is a lot of the laws of the second Passover, and then in between we have the actual Passover, okay? And we didn't get a chance to read this, unfortunately, so I'm just going to read it through very quickly with a quick translation, minimal translation, commentary, but I'll read it through because everything now is based on the Exodus, everything that's going to happen now, okay? So we're in Exodus 12:29. And then maybe I'll skip, unfortunately, the Pidyon Ben because I want to stick to the narrative of the story. So we have Exodus 12:29. And by the way, can I just get a sound check? You guys can all hear me and see me? Just someone give me a thumbs up or a yes or something. Let me know. that I'm being heard and seen? Anybody? Hello. Sound check. Sound check. 1, 2, 3. Sound check. Somebody type in hi. Say something. Do something. Wave. Okay. All right. We got it. All right. So we should be good. All right. So verse 29, Exodus 12:29. Follow along in your the translation of your choice, or if you're trying to learn Hebrew, you can follow along in the Hebrew and at the same time have the translation of your choice. It's an excellent way to learn Hebrew, but I wouldn't recommend it unless you're more advanced in Hebrew. It's just going to be a bit overwhelming. So if, let's say, you're at the initial stages where you're learning how to read the letters, I don't think it's worth it at this point to have you can look at the Hebrew, but I don't think it's worth it to try to, let's say, translate and make a match between the Hebrew letters and the English letters. On the other hand, if you are more advanced in Hebrew, you can already read the letters, you know some Hebrew, it might be very worth it because you can start picking up more Hebrew words and relating them to English words. Okay, all right. So we're in Exodus chapter 12, verse 29. Wahi b'hatsi ha laila wa Yahweh hika kol bechor be'eretz Mitzrayim mi bechor paro ha yushev al kisao ad bechor at shvi asher bebeit habor vechol bechor behema. So it was b'hatsi laila at midnight. Okay, there would be a lot to say about this. I'm very into calendars and times, Hebrew calendar, the biblical calendar in particular. I've been into calendars actually since I was a little child, and when I grew up in my room, I had a wall. I called it the calendar wall. I had I don't know, it must have been like 20 or 30 calendars. And I still remember at a very early age, I can't do it now, but I remember I think I was like 5 or 6 years old. And my parents would be able to say to me something like, what day does May 18th fall out on 1973? And I'd be able to figure it out in my head. I can't do it now. I was able to do it back then. At any rate, the point is not to talk about me, but to say that if we had more time, I'd go into exactly what this means, Bahatziya Laila, okay? But basically it means midnight. That's what it means, okay? Okay, Yahweh ka kor bechor. So it was at midnight, okay? And Yahweh struck down all of the firstborn of Egypt. Notice firstborn, right? That's the key here, firstborn. Of course, we've spoken many times about the theme of the firstborn goes all the way back to the book of Genesis, right? Already, all the way back to Cain and Abel already, right? Where Cain kills Abel, right? And and goes right through the patriarchs and right up through Moshe and Aaron. It will go into Aaron's children. The first of the two firstborn are killed by bringing foreign fire, and it goes right down through all the way through David. David is the smallest and least significant of his brothers, and yet he's chosen as the king of Israel. So there's this theme again and again of the firstborn, and specifically the firstborn being usurped and replaced. Okay, so just to keep that in mind. All right. Be'eretz Mitzrayim mibachor Paro, from the firstborn of Paro, hayeshev al kiso, who sits on his throne, ad bachor shvi asher bebeit habor, and right down to the firstborn of the prisoner who sits in the dungeon. Literally, Beit Habor means the house of the whole. The whole house, HOLE, but the dungeon. Okay, and including all of the firstborn of the animals. Okay, well, we can get into a long philosophical discussion about why did the firstborn of the animals have to die? What did they do wrong, and all this kind of stuff. But there are many other places to get into such a discussion, so I'm not going to do it here. I want to rush through this, not rush through, but I want to go through these verses pretty quickly. Okay, Ariel Ben, Shalom, Ariel and Ben. Shabbat Shalom. ויקם פרעה לילה הוא וכל עבדיו וכל מצרים ותהי צעקה גדולה. Sometimes where there are times where servants go against them and say they're not included. So, for instance, I think it was the 8th plague with the fleas, if I remember correctly, where his servant said, "Listen, don't you see? Enough is enough. Let these people go." All of Mitzrayim is finished off, right? I think it was that plague. At any rate, V'chol Mitzrayim and all of Egypt. So that means Pharaoh, his servants, right? So if this were the modern United States, this would be Joe Biden. We could only hope such a thing might happen. Would that get rid of Hunter? No, I don't know if Hunter's. Well, I think whatever. I'm not going there. All right. So at any rate, and all of his servants. So that would be like Nancy Pelosi and all the rest of the scum that run the country along with Joe Biden and all of Egypt. That would be all the rest of. So basically, the point is it's the leader and all of the the top level government officials are mentioned along with the leader, and then all of the rest of the people. And there was a great cry in Egypt because there was not a single household in which there was not in it a dead person. Okay, specifically dead firstborn. Okay, so that's it. So now something interesting to point out is that this is a fulfillment of what Moshe originally said. Moshe originally said when he came to Pharaoh. So I think it was Exodus 3 is in the desert. So I think it's going to be Exodus 4, right? No, Moses leaves for Egypt. Moses, Exodus 5. It's going to be at the beginning of Exodus 5, right? Let me just find it here. One second. Where is it? One second. I want to find one verse. No, I can't find it. Okay, it doesn't matter. When Moshe first came to Pharaoh, he said, free my people Israel, because Israel is my firstborn, and if you do not free my firstborn, then I will slay your firstborn. That was all the way at the beginning, way before any of the plagues, right? So even before, let's go back. All right. With the killing of the firstborn of the Egyptians. Okay, but so why do we have to go if this is already what Moshe threatens Pharaoh? Why do we have to go through all of these other 9 plagues first, and then only now get to the 10th plague, the killing of the firstborn? Right. So again, I think the answer is in the Torah itself. It's probably a lot of answers, but one of the answers that's given, the answer that's clearly given in the Torah, is that God wanted to multiply the signs and wonders. In other words, multiply the plagues for His own glory, so that His name should go out among the world, right? So the whole world could see that this God is real, that His strength is real, right? But just to point out that it was already told before any of these plagues happened. The threat already went to Pharaoh originally, that if you don't free my firstborn Israel, then your firstborn will die. I will kill your firstborn. And that's only happening now after we go through 9 plagues. Initially, at any of them, which Pharaoh could have relented, could have let the children of Israel go out into the desert, and then this never would have happened, right? That prediction or that prophecy or that threat never would have come true. But we saw again that God hardened the heart of Pharaoh. Alternatively, He strengthened or made obstinate the heart of Pharaoh, or He made heavy the heart of Pharaoh. There are 3 different verbs used, right? Hichbadati, literally made heavy. We spoke again about the possible implications of what that means to Egyptian culture. As many Egyptologists point out, that the Egyptian Book of Dead speaks about weight when one dies, the heart is weighed against the feather. We've spoken about this all for a number of weeks. So that hichbadati, made heavy the heart of Pharaoh. Other times it says chazek, or ichzakti, I will make strong, right? I will make stubborn, let's say, the heart of Pharaoh. And then at other times it says what's the third one? I think iksheti, right? I will make hard. I will make obstinate the heart of Pharaoh, right? At any rate, the idea is more or less the same. That Pharaoh is made to is somehow, shall we say, encouraged or enticed to refuse all of these offers. So it does come down to this in the end, where now the killing of the firstborn, that was originally predicted, threatened, prophesied at the very first time that Moshe spoke to Pharaoh, is now coming true. Okay? All right, so the Exodus begins. This is in verse 31. This is 12:31. ויקרא למשה ולאהרון לילה, ויאמר קומו סעו מתוך עמי, גם אתם גם בני ישראל, לכו ועבדו את יהוה כי דברכם. Okay, so Moshe, so Pharaoh, so he called. The implication is Pharaoh called to Moshe and Aaron that night, and he said to them, "Get up and get out from my people. Get the heck out of this place!" Right? Finally, Pharaoh is relenting. That's it. He's been brought to his knees. Okay. Gamatem gam bnei Israel, you, meaning Moshe and Aaron, who he hates the most, right? Because he sees them as directly responsible for destroying his country. Gam bnei Israel, also the children of Israel. Do it, Yahweh. Go and worship Yahweh, your God, in other words, Kedabrachem, as you have spoken. So that's it. This is complete and utter capitulation by Pharaoh. Pharaoh is now completely, he is now completely given in. He's completely capitulated, and on top of it, he's recognizing the existence of Yahweh, which he's done progressively, right? In a number of places, asking Moshe and Aaron to pray for him, to entreat Yahweh for him, or even pray for him, asking Moshe and Aaron to have Yahweh bless him, right? So now this God who he refused to even recognize the existence of, who he just laughed off as just a joke, he is now completely capitulating to this God Yahweh, recognizing his existence, begging Aaron and Moshe to pray for him and his people, for their own for their own, meaning for the Egyptians' own well-being, and letting them go. Okay, so this is really the process of the Exodus. The process of the Exodus is about the recognition, the recognition or the showing of the existence and strength of Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Israel, to the Egyptians, to Israel themselves, and by proxy to the entire world, right? And this happens in a process, right? We see this can almost be thought of as a paradigm for our world. There's so many people out there who don't want to know God, right? Who don't want to know who Yahweh is, don't want to know who the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is. And eventually they will know. They're going to know the easy way, or they're going to know the hard way. You could choose the easy way. Pharaoh could have chosen the easy way, or you could be stubborn and choose the hard way. But in the end, you're going to know who Yahweh is. And that's why I think the Exodus is such an important story and such an important paradigm, because it shows how Yahweh, the God of Israel, goes from being unknown among Pharaoh and his people to being the main God, or perhaps the only God, being recognized by Pharaoh and his people in the end, even if it's only temporary, right? Because we know Pharaoh is going to relent and he's going to go chase after the children of Israel. But that's the real story here, and that goes back to why God said he wanted to multiply the signs and wonders, right? He wants to do this in kind of a progression, kind of a series, so that each plague is more than the next, more, so that slowly slowly but surely it sinks in to the minds of Pharaoh, to the minds of his servants, and to the minds of all the Egyptians, and also to the minds of Israel, who were a little bit reluctant at first as well, if you remember, because their lot got worse, not better, when they had to now go out and gather the straw for themselves. But it sinks in gradually that the power, the existence, and the power of Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that's really, in my eyes, what the story of the Exodus is about. It's a story of God showing his existence and his power to the entire world. Okay, specifically to Israel, secondarily to Egypt, and thirdly to the entire world. Okay, so let's go ahead, but I digress. Thank you. Exodus 4:22. Israel's my first point. Thank you, Ariella and Orben. Okay, so gam tzonchem, gam bikarchem, kechu kasher dibartem ulechu uberachtem gam oti. Okay, take your flocks, take your cattle. Okay, take them, get out. Kasher dibartem, as you said, lechu uberachtem gam oti. Go and bless me also. Right. So now he's begging this God who he would not recognize. He's now begging to be blessed by this God. Right. Well, I guess could we say that Pharaoh was a convert to Israelitism, to Judaism, whatever you want to call it? I guess temporarily he was converted by the sword, so to speak. He saw the light for a moment, but then the light quickly faded as he went after the Israelites, as we'll see in this week's parsha. Okay, verse 33. "Techazek Mitzrayim al ha'am lemaher lishalham min ha'aretz ki amru kulanu metim." So Egypt pressed strongly upon the people, meaning upon the people of Israel, to hurry up, to hurry up and get them out of there from the land, because they said we're all going to die. Okay, so they didn't know it was only the firstborn, I guess, right? They said they thought that's it. That was just the beginning, right? This was it. This is the end of the world, the end times. We're all going to die. That's the end of everything. Okay, verse 34. Why Isaham idba sekot terem yahmats. So this is an important verse regarding the belief, or let me translate the verse first. So Exodus 12:34. So the people carried their dough, their kneaded dough, terem yahmatz, before it had a chance to yahmatz, related to the word chametz, right? Before it had a chance to rise, before it had a chance to become leavened, misharotam sirurot besimlotam, and their misharotam is their kneading troughs, their kneading bowls, were wrapped in their garments, in their robes, al shechmam, on their shoulders. So they're carrying their kneading bowls out on their shoulders. They're wrapping their robes around them. Why would they wrap their robes around them? I guess to keep the dough from drying out, perhaps to keep animals like insects or birds from picking at it. But this is important because we're going to see that when they get out into the desert, what are they going to do with this dough? It says explicitly that they're going to make matzot. They're going to make unleavened bread from it. And this is a polemic against the rabbis. The rabbis say that the dough can only sit for 18 minutes. Get the flock out of here. Exactly. The rabbis say that the dough can only sit for a maximum of 18 minutes before it's cooked, or else it is considered chametz, or else it's considered leavened bread. Okay, so if you're a rabbinical Jew and you're buying kosher matzah, or you're making your own kosher matzah, very impossible to do because you need special dough and all kinds of stuff. But if you're buying matzah, then it is kneaded, and as soon as it's kneaded, no leavening agent is added. Mind you, there's no yeast in it, or no baking powder, no baking soda, nothing like that, or sourdough starter, nothing. Within 18 minutes, it's rolled out and it's placed in the oven and baked. I think the baking process has to begin within 18 minutes. Okay, and the rabbis say if it's more than that, if it's 19 minutes, that's already considered leavened bread. That's already considered chametz. Okay, well, this verse is going to prove how ridiculous, how, excuse my French, stupid it is, because we're going to see that the Israelites, they took their dough on their shoulders, okay? And not only that, but we can assume at this point that it already had leavening agent in it, right? But even if we can assume that it doesn't have leavening agent in it, well, let's even assume that it does have, let's go that it doesn't have leavening agent in it, okay? That even that, after they get out into the desert, then they take this dough, it says explicitly, we're going to see, and they bake it into matzah, into oven unleavened bread. So unless they were able to get all 600,000 of them, plus whoever else came along, out from Egypt into the desert within 18 minutes, and able at that point to start cooking their bread into matzot, then that proves that the rabbis' strictness of the 18 minutes is absolutely ridiculous. Okay, so let's move ahead. What happened? It broke?
Soup knocked it over.
Okay, just put it over there, okay? Just put it over there. I'll deal with it later. I'll glue it or something, okay? Just leave it. All right, no big deal. Okay, so verse 35. So we're in Exodus 12:35. ובני ישראל עשו כדבר משה, וישאלו ממצרים כלי כסף וכלי זהב ושמלות. So the children of Israel did as Moses had spoken. They requested from the Egyptians vessels of silver, vessels of gold, and garments. Okay, so in other words, we're going to see. Verse 36, Yahweh natan et hayin am be'ernei Mitzrayim v'yash'ilum v'yinatzlu et Mitzrayim. And Yahweh gave, literally says how do they usually translate? The favor of the people meaning in the favor of the Israelites in the eyes of the Egyptians, meaning God made the Egyptians look favorably upon the Israelites, and so they gave it. The Egyptians gave these things to the Israelites, and they despoiled Mitzrayim. Okay, they went out with rechush gadol. They went out with a great amount of property. Again, we mentioned last week that this is the promise that was given all the way back in Genesis 15 to Abraham before he was called Abraham. When he was still called Abram, it said you will serve 400 years, or you will be the servants oppressed for 400 years in a land that is not yours, and then you will leave that land rechush gadol, with great amounts of property. And so this is actually the fulfillment of a promise that was made over 400 years earlier to Abram, that when finally the Israelites are freed from this nation, which Abraham was not even told what nation it would be, that they would leave with great amounts of possessions. And this is that. So that back in Genesis chapter 15, that verse back in Genesis chapter 15 is now fulfilled in these two verses. Okay, that when they left, the Egyptians gave the Israelites silver, gold, and garments. Okay, verse 37. So, وَيِسْعُوا بَنَي إِسْرَائِيل مِرَمْسֵس سُكَّوْتَ כ-600,000 רגלי הגיבורים לבד מיטף. So the children of Israel, they traveled from Ramses. Remember, Ramses and Pitom were the two cities. Usually, the Arei Miskanot, usually translated as storage cities. Although Miskanot it's not clear what that word means, but nonetheless, so they left Ramses. That was one of the storage cities. Sukkota, towards Sukkot. I'm sorry, towards the city or the region of Sukkot. כ-600,000 רגלי הגברים לבד מיטף, and there were 600,000 men on foot, לבד מיטף, and that's not including the children. Okay, so 600,000 men. Okay, not including the children. We mentioned also that usually women and children are lumped together, so we can assume that this would include only the men, and that when it says lavad mitaf, that's also including the woman. So if we have the same amount of women, let's say, as men, so that would be a total of, let's say, 1,200,000 altogether, and children, who knows? Let's give it another 600,000. So that's maybe close, somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million Israelites leaving the land of Egypt. Okay. Verse 38. Ragam erev rav ala itam wason ubakar mikne kaved meod, and also so this is usually translated as a mixed multitude, meaning a whole bunch of. We have no idea what happens with this mixed multitude. They're mentioned another 2 times in the Torah as the Asaf Suf, and it's not even 100% clear if it's speaking about the same group that went out with the Israelites, but it's very possibly is, because the word Asaf Suf comes from the word Asaf or Yasaf, which means to add onto. Okay, so. Other words, those that were appendages or were added onto to Israel. Okay, any rate, Allah itam wasam bakar mikne kaved ma'od. Okay, so and also great amount of flocks, cattle. Mikne is just livestock. Kaved ma'od, very very many. Okay, verse 39. Wayafu et batsek. So here's the verse I was talking about. Verse 39. Wa yafu et ha batsek. אשר הוציאו ממצרים רות מסות, כי לא חמץ, כי גורשו ממצרים ולא יכלו להתמעמע, וגם סיבה לא עשו להם. Okay, so whenever they got out into the desert, so they were heading to Sukkot, okay, and either when they got out into the desert or maybe when they got to this place Sukkot, then verse 39, they baked the dough, which they had taken out of Egypt. Remember, those are we said they had their kneading troughs on their shoulders and wrapped in their garments. So they took that dough when they got out into the desert and they baked it into what? Ugot matzot, into loaves or cakes of matzot, of unleavened bread. Okay, so that could not have all happened in 18 minutes. Again, a clear polemic against the ridiculous rabbinical stringency having to bake unleavened or dough that does not have any leavening agent within 18 minutes, because otherwise it's going to rise. It will not rise. You can leave unleavened dough. I'm sorry. You can leave dough that does not have a leavening agent in it, even for a day. After a day, you're going to get a little bit of rising, but not very much. But if it's not too warm out, you can leave dough without a leavening agent in it for even a day, and you're not really going to get any rising whatsoever. So it's ridiculous to say that that it has to be done within in 24 hours. And if you're into bread baking, you know that even if you let dough sit for a while, if it does not have a leavening agent added to it, you're not going to be able to bake it into leavened bread. Really, it may rise a little bit, okay, but essentially it's just going to go bad after a couple of days. And what you need to do is you need to take it. You need to take a little bit of it, and you add more flour to it, and slowly you build a sourdough starter, right? And that's basically concentrated yeast, bacteria, other things that release carbon dioxide into the dough. And then once it's concentrated enough, then you add it to your dough, and then then it's enough to make the bread rise. But unless you have some kind of concentrated leavening agent, and in the ancient times they used sourdough starter. In fact, it's called sa'or in the Torah, and the word sa'or is clearly, it can be proven etymologically that it's related to the English word sour. Okay, so they use sa'or, which is sourdough starter. Sometimes it's translated as yeast in their bread. In their bread to bake it into bread. So if it does not have any kind of concentrated leavening agent, sourdough starter, in this day and age, we use commercially bought wheat yeast, either the dry yeast or the wet yeast, or the other two main leavening agents that are used are baking powder and baking soda. Okay, but unless it has some kind of leavening agent, concentrated leavening agent, you can leave the dough even for a day, 2, 3. You're not going to get any significant rising, as anyone who knows who bakes bread can confirm. Okay, kilo hametz. At any rate, they took this dough and they cooked it into ugot matzot, into cakes of matzot. Kilo hametz, because it did not have a chance to rise or to become leavened. Why? Ki gurshu mitzrayim, because they were thrown out of Egypt. They were kicked out of Egypt. Velo yachlu litmamea, and they could not tarry. They cannot take their time. They cannot, take their sweet time. Gam seda lo asulahem, and they didn't have time to make sedas, provisions, usually translated as. They didn't have time to bring proper provisions with them either. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Verse 40. I'm going to go down to 42. Then we're going to go over to our parsha. This is just, again, to get everything in context for this week's parsha. Okay. מושב בני ישראל אשר ישבו במצרים 30 שנה ו400 שנה. And the time, well, Moshav, the dwelling of the children of Israel, but it's speaking about the time of dwelling, the amount of time that the children of Israel dwelled in Egypt was 430 years. Okay, we spoke about this last year. If we work backwards, it would seem that the 430 years goes back to the time of Abraham, and I would posit that it specifically goes back to Genesis 15, the time in the time when God appears to Abraham in the Brit Ben Abitarim, which is usually translated as the covenant of the split animals, and says that your children will be descendants in a land that is not theirs, or will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs. And they will, for 400 years. Okay, so there is no way it would not make sense that when Jacob and Joseph arrived in Egypt, that was 400 years before the time that's being spoken about now. And we went through this last year with some numbers. I'm not going to do it now, but basically, 430 years earlier takes us back to the time of Abraham. Okay. So what's the discrepancy, by the way? Here it says 430 years. In Genesis 15, God says to Abraham that your descendants will be in the land of Egypt, or will be in a land that is not theirs, for 400 years. Okay, here it says 430. What's the discrepancy? 400 is an approximation, right? We don't always have the exact numbers. Sometimes things are rounded off. Okay, and here the exact number is given. Okay, Again, if we had more time, we could go into that in great detail, but I'm not going to do it. Verse 41, and so it was after, or at the end of 430 years, and so it was on this very day. This phrase is used a bunch of times in the Torah, and it just emphasizes the idea of that very day. Okay, all of the hosts or the armies of Yahweh, speaking about the Israelites, went out from the land of Egypt. Verse 42, Leil Shimurim Hu. This is usually translated as a night of watchfulness. Nobody really knows what this means. Since this is not in our parsha, I'm not going to go into it right now, but my understanding is it's a night where symbolically you wait for Yahweh to show up. Okay. In this case, this was the first Passover, right? So they're waiting. They're waiting for Yahweh to show up and basically free them, right? They're sitting there again. They're sitting there in their houses. They have the blood of the Paschal Lamb on their doorposts and their lintels. They're sitting inside. They're eating the Passover offering. They have their loins girded. They have their staff in their hands. They have their sandals on their shoes, and they're just waiting basically for the moment, right? And we saw earlier it happens at midnight, the Chatzot Laila. Okay, so Leil Shimurim Hu LeYahweh. It is a night of waiting or watchfulness for Yahweh to take them for taking them out of the land of Egypt. Hu Alayla Hazeh LeYahweh. This night is a night. This is a night of watchfulness or waiting for Yahweh among the children of Israel throughout their entire generation. So the idea is that when this night comes each year, hold on, I'll be right back. Which it's coming up sooner than we think, right? Because Passover is not too far away now. That this night of watchfulness is, the way I understand it, is we're basically supposed to wait up for Yahweh, or at least in our minds, recreate this idea that the Israelites were waiting up for Yahweh to come and free them, right? They're huddled in their houses. They're ready to go, right? There's destruction all around them, not in the land of Goshen where they live, but all in the rest of Egypt, right? Who knows what screams they heard, and who knows what news was getting out, what was going on, and they're just huddled in their houses. They cannot leave their houses, right? They have the blood on their doorposts, and they're just waiting, right? So that's the idea. They're just huddled and waiting for God to come save them and free them from their oppression in Egypt. And we're supposed to recreate, or at least remember, this feeling each year, and that's what I think this means when it says it's a night of watchfulness for Yahweh, for all of the children of Israel throughout their generations. Okay. Santa. Alrighty, and then here the rest of Exodus 12 is very important, very interesting, but we're not going to go into it now because it's not part of our parsha. These are the laws of the Passover offering for future generations. I will point out that there's one famous Karaite who interprets this verse. Famous, I wouldn't use the word famous, well-known Karaite who incorrectly interprets this verse. He understands this as meaning that once a non-Israelite converts to the Israelite religion, then there is no difference whatsoever. They must follow every single law of the Torah exactly as a native-born Israelite. I don't exactly think that's true. There are certain laws that apply to Gerim, that apply to people who join the nation of Israel, that do not apply to the native-born Israelite, and vice versa. I won't get into the details right now, but the point is that this verse does not say such a thing. This verse where it says Torah, the word Torah doesn't mean the entire 5 books of Moses or all of the laws in the 5 books of Moses. It means set of instructions, and it's speaking about the set of instructions regarding the Passover offering each year. In other words, it's talking about what has been previously stated in verses 43 to 48. The set of instructions, Torah, is referring to the laws of the Passover offering. And so it is saying that the laws of the Passover offering are the same for the native-born, Ezrach, and for the ger, for the sojourner, or the shall we say the convert, or the person who joins the Israelite religion, if you want to call it that. Okay, and so that Karaite who has gone out into the world and misused and abused this verse, basically to try to say convert, I would say converted everyone he got in contact to, but basically to tell them, that this verse says you if you join the nation of Israel, then you keep the Torah exactly as the rest of the nation of Israel does, is really distorting this verse badly, and I think he's done a lot of damage. Anyway, I won't go into it more than that. If we had more time, I would. Okay, so let's go on to, this is now Exodus 13. These are the laws of the redemption of the firstborn, which I'm going to skip because it's not part of this week's Parsha. Let me just see if there's anything I want to mention here. Nope, I'm going to skip right ahead. So now we resume the story of the Exodus. So this is now this week's Parsha. We're in Exodus chapter 13, verse 17. And this is the resumption of the story of the Exodus. So the Israelites are already out of Egypt, right? And now let's see what happens to them when they're out of Egypt. Verse 17, Waihi Beshalach Paro et ha'am v'lo naham Elohim derech eretz Pelishtim ki karov hu ki amar Elohim pen nahem ha'am bir otam milhama v'shavu mitzrayma. So when Pharaoh sent the people, or let the people go, the people of Israel go, he did not lead them derech eretz Filishtim, on the route or on the road of the land of the Philistines. Ki karovhu, even though it was the closest, the shortest route, literally because it was, even though it was nearby, okay, or even though it was close. But he didn't lead them in that direction, right? So we know the Philistines lived along the sea, right? So for instance, they lived in what is today Gaza, the area of Gaza, the Gaza Strip, right? So the shortest route to the land of Israel would have been basically straight along the coast, right? Kind of hugging the Mediterranean coast, right up into the land of the Philistines and into the land of Canaan, okay? But God did not do that. Why? Kiamar Elohim, because God said, "Pen yinachem ha'am birotam milhama," lest the people relent or regret when they see war. Washavu mitzrayma. In other words, the point is that he could have led them this way. If you look at a map of Israel, Google Maps, Israel. Okay, so Goshen, where the Israelites were, is in this area here. Okay, well, this is the Nile River, maybe around here or so. Okay, and so the easiest route would have been straight along the coast, right up into this area here. This is the Gaza Strip, which is today controlled by the Arabs, also known as the Palestinians, quote unquote. And so that would have been the easiest way, right? But the point is that God decided not to do this because they left Egypt and went right into the land of the Philistines. Then there was going to be a war with the Philistines, as there was so many times in the later books of the Tanakh, the later books of the Old Testament. So the first thing that would have happened to the Israelites is they would have basically had to have a war with the Philistines to fight their way into the country. And God felt they were not ready for this. Okay, they were slaves. They were slaves in Egypt, right? They did not really yet know how to fight, or maybe they were just not ready for a fight after all they'd been through. And so God decided that if he does this, if he leads them in that direction, then they're going to relent. They're going to basically get scared, and they're going to run back to Egypt, right? And we see this idea a number of times of the Torah expressing the idea that the Israelites might go back to Egypt, or even the Israelites saying we should go back to Egypt. At one point, they say they're going to appoint a leader to take them back to Egypt, right? And they say to Moshe, "Why did you bring us out into the desert to die? It would have been better if we just stayed in Egypt and served the Egyptians," right? So there's this constant fear in the Torah, or this constant concern that the Israelites are going to run back to Egypt, right? That's what they're used to. And why not? Pharaoh would have, probably accepted them back as slaves. They could resume their former life as slaves, what they're used to. Go back to what they're used to. No big deal. It kind of reminds me of that scene from the Matrix where what is it? Cypher, right? Decides that he's going to meet with the agents. He's had enough of this, this life of freedom, which is far from glamorous. He's just eating, glop. That what's that little guy's name? Mouse has prepared for him, or Mouse has given him, and he's decided he had enough, and he'd rather be a slave in the Matrix than be and eat steak and wine, and even if it's all fake, even if he's really a slave, but he'd rather do that than have the raw reality, sometimes unpleasant reality of a freedom, right? Certainly the American Revolutionary soldiers back in the late 1700s, they didn't have it easy, right? They had to sleep out in the cold, and they had to fight, and they had to establish a new country. It wasn't very glamorous, but they chose that rather than go back. Well, many did want to go back to be part of subjects of the English crown, but some didn't. And so choosing the way of freedom is not always the easy way. It's not always the glamorous way. But it's ultimately the most rewarding way, and the only way that a person can self-actualize. And that's exactly, in my opinion, what's going on here, right? So the Israelites are now being offered freedom, but it's not a very happy, or it's not a very glamorous vision of freedom. Okay, they have to go out into the desert. Okay, if they have to go, if they are led straight to Israel, to the land of Israel, then they're going to have to fight the Philistines to fight their way into the country to take it over. It's easier just to go back into the Matrix, right? At least we had food there, right? Even the Israelites said they spoke about the cucumbers and the melons that they had. Cucumbers and melons are the same. I think there were no. I think it's just melons that they had back and the onions that they had back in the land of Egypt, right? And their easy life. They remembered their good life in the Matrix, even though they were slaves. They would rather do that than have to face the harsh reality of freedom and independence out in the desert, or fighting their way past the Philistines into the promised land, into the land of Egypt, right? So there's always this fear, and it recurs throughout the Pentateuch, throughout the 5 books of Moses, that the Israelites are going to relent and say, we've had enough of this, and they're going to run back to Egypt. They're going to ask the agents to reinsert them back into the Matrix, where at least life was easy and what was going to happen on a day-to-day basis was known. Okay, so he doesn't lead them in that direction, right? So he doesn't lead them along the coast right up into the land of the Philistines. Instead, ויסב אלוהים את העם דרך המדבר ים סוף, וחמושים עלו בני ישראל מארץ מצרים. Okay? So God, yasev literally means circled them around. Okay? Sav means circle. Like, for instance, in Hebrew, a dreidel, a spinning top, is called a sivivon, from the word sav. Sav means to go around. So he led them around. So God led the people around, derech hamidbar, by way of, or on the road of the route of the desert, or of the wilderness, Yam Suf, the wilderness of the Sea of Reeds. Okay, so the Sea of Reeds. So of course, right. most people associate the Sea of Reeds with the Red Sea. Okay, over here. Okay, this is the Gulf of Suez. This is the Gulf of Aqaba. Right here is Aqaba, Jordan. Right here is Eilat, Israel. Okay, so basically, it would seem, although of course it's never 100% known, but it would seem that what happened is that God led them out instead of hugging the coast, He led them further south. Okay, across the sea somewhere, across the Sea of Reeds somewhere. Okay, let's see, somewhere around here. Okay, and that's where the sea split. That's where the Red Sea parted. I don't know. Let's say down here. Okay, and then they went out into the Sinai Peninsula, and that's why it's called the Sinai Peninsula, because many scholars, although not all, believe that the Sinai Desert is here. Okay, so Hamushim alu b'nei Israel me'eretz Mitzrayim. So Hamushim is equipped or armed. The children of Israel went up from the land of Egypt. I'd like to get some insight into this verse right here. So this is Exodus 13:17. Let's look at our old staple where we always start, Robert Alter. And then maybe we'll look at some other commentaries. By the way, any questions, any comments so far that anyone has? Okay, if you do, type it in, or you can come on the broadcast and speak if you wish. So we are in Exodus chapter 13, and this is verse 17. So it's page 654 up here. So I have two copies of the Robert Alter, because one I have the actual verses, and then the other one I have the commentary. So 654, verse 17. Okay, so this is what Robert Alter says. We now return to the story, meaning the story of the Exodus, with an indication of the escape route that will be important as we approach the dramatic event at the Sea of Reeds by way of the land of the Philistines. So as we said, this would have been the most direct route to Canaan along what amounted to a coastal highway up through the area that is the present-day Gaza Strip, right? Just as we said before. This route was in fact heavily fortified by the Egyptians as the principal avenue for the varying imperial enterprises to the north, and so would have immediately confronted the fleeing slaves with the prospect of battle. Okay, so he's saying that it wasn't the Philistines that would have caused them problems, but the Egyptians, because they had encampments there. Okay, the Philistines in this period are an anachronistic reference, for they arrived from the Aegean region and thus are known by the sea peoples in this coastal strip during the 12th century BCE, perhaps as much as 100 years after the conjectured date of the Exodus in the later 13th century. Okay, so he's saying the Philistines, right? So it's known the Philistines are also called the sea peoples, and he's saying they didn't even arrive till a century later. So the threat was not really the Philistines, but the Egyptians. Of course, there are different ideas of when exactly the Philistines arrived, but it is generally accepted that they arrived from the Aegean region, meaning from basically the islands of Greece, the Grecian islands, and they're also called the Sea People. Okay, all right, so possibility. At any rate, they were going to run into some problems there. Sea of Reeds. So verse 18. So he led them by way of the desert, or by way of the wilderness of the Sea of Reeds. So Robert Alter has this to say about it. This is not the Red Sea, as older translations have it, but most likely a marshland in the northeastern part of Egypt. Marshes might provide some realistic kernel for the tale of a waterway that is at one moment passable and the next flooded. But it must be conceded that elsewhere Yam Suf refers to the Red Sea, and in modern Hebrew, if you speak about the Red Sea, in Hebrew it's Yam Suf, right? The Sea of Reeds. Okay? And some scholars have recently argued that the story means to heighten the miraculous character of the event, through the parting of a real sea. Even if the setting is a marsh, the event is reported in strongly supernatural terms. So basically what Robert Alter is saying here is, again, if we look at the map, that it's not logical that the Israelites would have crossed, let's say, here or here, let's say crossing the Gulf of Suez over here. It had to be up in this region over here, because that's the only way the story of a sea splitting and dry land appearing in the middle of the sea could make sense, right? But that's not necessarily true. Really, nobody knows exactly where the crossing was. Nobody knows really where Mount Sinai is. Again, if you look on YouTube, you can see a million different videos of this scholar saying it's here and another scholar saying it's there, and on and on and on to no end, ad nauseum. But it's somewhere. Let's say if we look here at Port Said, okay, and we follow it down through the Gulf of Suez down to the Red Sea proper, right? It's going to be somewhere along this waterway, and Robert Alter kind of concedes at the end that, right, it must be conceded that elsewhere Yam Suf refers to the Red Sea explicitly, and that's true. We could, if we went through the instances of the Red Sea, it would be clear, okay, in the Tanakh. And so some scholars have recently argued the story means to heighten the miraculous character of the event through the parting of a real sea, right? So maybe the Torah is trying to say there was a miracle, and in which case it wouldn't have to be up here in the marshlands, but it could be somewhere down here, Gulf of Suez, or perhaps even down here, right? So of course, as believing Torah Israelites / Jews, we have no problem believing that that an actual sea split, and so therefore that would take away the necessity of having to put it up here in the marshlands to make it fit with day-to-day reality, and we could bring it down south to the Gulf of Suez, or who knows, even maybe out here, right? So that's the deal. Hamushim. Let's talk about that word for a second. So they went armed from the land of Egypt, it says, and that's verse 18. So Robert Alter doesn't have anything to say about that one. So that's been alternately translated as equipped, meaning they had all the equipment to do what they needed to out in the desert, or armed, in other words, ready for war. Okay. If we had a bit more time, maybe we'd look into some of the commentaries, but I don't want to focus on that right now. Okay, verse 19. Who is Robert Alter? Robert Alter is a Bible scholar, I guess you could say. He's a professor of, I can't remember what his official title is, but he's a professor of biblical studies or something like that. And he put out a book, or now it's a series of books, maybe 20 years ago or something like that, or starting 20 years ago, which is kind of like a modern academic, intellectual, but at the same time kind of literary or poetic not really poetic, that's the wrong word, but kind of a literary, or I don't know, I can't find the exact word. He's kind of a little bit poetic in the way he interprets things, right? Like a whole wax poetic, I guess you could say. It's just a good modern scholarly translation into English of the Old Testament, and now the entire Old Testament is here. He has the 5 books of Moses, the prophets, and the writings. Okay, so I have all of this here. If you want, I can send you a copy. Just let me know. I highly recommend it. I would even recommend, like, buying the book. I think it's called the 5 books of Moses. Here, I'll just go to the original screen. It's called the Hebrew Bible. This is the whole Old Testament, but I think the 5 books of Moses. So volume 1, the 5 books of Moses. So that's the 5 books of Moses. It's an excellent translation, a very, very good translation, and good commentary. Okay, I don't always agree with it. Some other scholars, Bible scholars, love him. Some hate him. Some say he's kind of a little bit too poetic or literary. Some say his interpretations are sometimes a bit wrong or shallow. I don't think so. I think it's a great translation, and it's great for someone who really wants to get a good translation and understanding of the Old Testament. I think he's excellent. He's really excellent because his translation is scholarly, right? So he's not coming per se from a religious point of view. A lot of times he'll quote, let's say the documentary hypothesis, which if you don't know what that is, it doesn't matter, but it's the standard accepted interpretation or understanding of the Old Testament in academic circles. Basically, that was written by multiple authors and then put together as a single book. So he accepts that, or he references that, but he doesn't obsess over it, right? That's not always his answer. So he kind of just gives a kind of a good insight into a lot of the things that are said in the Old Testament. He'll quote other commentators. Sometimes he'll quote a number of different commentators and says this one says this and the other one says that, and he'll say what he thinks. It's just a good, solid translation. It's a modern translation. The translation is not necessarily literal, word for word, but he chooses the route more of a bit more of paraphrasing to express the idea behind the original words in the Hebrew. So it's just a very good modern academic, but not annoyingly so. In other words, it's academic, but it's accessible to the layperson. It's very accessible. It's just a good modern, scholarly, but not annoyingly so, translation and commentary on the Old Testament. I highly recommend it. I really do. I don't always agree with what he says. Often I do, but I don't always. But I think it's a really good translation and commentary. It's much better, in my opinion, than sitting down and reading, let's say, the King James version without any commentary, or if you're going into the realm of Orthodox Judaism, then reading, let's say, the whatchamacallit translation, or what do you call that thing again that everyone uses? I forgot the name of it. Not the Sonsino. I forgot. The one that all the Orthodox Jews, all the English-speaking Orthodox Jews use. I forgot, the name escapes my mind at the moment, but I highly recommend it. Let's put it that way. Okay. If you want, I'll be happy to send you the PDF, even though I shouldn't, but I will. And or you can buy it online. Okay, just let me know. All right. So V'yikach Moshe et atzmot Yosef. Oh, okay. Yosef blah 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 blah. Right. So we're reading Robert Alter's commentary. Yeah. So again, as Torah-believing Israelites, we don't have to say that he went through marshes. We could say he went down here somewhere in the Gulf of Suez, out into the Sinai Peninsula, or maybe even further south. Who knows? Okay, so yeah, where were we? Verse 19. Vayikach Moshe et atzmot Yosef imo. So Moshe took the bones of Joseph with him. Ki hashbeach et bnei Israel lemor, because he had most certainly, or he had solemnly made Israel swear, the children of Israel swear. Hashbeach hishbia. Okay, so we have repetition. Remember, repetition in the Torah always means emphasis. Okay, hashbeach hishbia. So literally, if I were to translate it literally, because he had sworn the children of Israel, saying, who had sworn? Joseph had made the children of Israel swear that they would take his bones out when the time came for them to leave. Right? Again, in the Hebrew, hashbeah, which means make swear. Okay, it's in what's called the causative form. Okay, so cause to swear. So Joseph made the Israelites swear, and then we have the repetition of the word hashbeah hishbia, or the almost repetition of the word. Okay, hashbeah hishbia. So made them most solemnly swear, or certainly made them swear. Again, that's the way the English usually deals with this repetition, right? Because it doesn't make sense if I say in English, he made them swear, right? You just think my brain got caught or something like that. But in the Hebrew, that's the way emphasis is expressed. It's with repetition. You do see this sometimes in English, right? So if I want to say I could say it's very, very cold out today. Okay, the repetition of the word very means emphasis, right? It emphasizes just how cold it is. It increases it. It's what's the opposite of diminutive?
Augmented.
It's augmentative. It's an augmentative phrase, right? It's very, very cold out there. It's not just cold; it's very, very cold out, right? So we do see that in English sometimes, but not as often. This is a standard way of expressing emphasis in the Hebrew, and it's often translated into the English as certainly or solemnly or something like that. Okay, so in this case, he made them solemnly swear. He made the children of Israel solemnly swear, right? But it really says he made them swear. He made the children of Israel swear, saying, and what did he make them? What did he say to them when he made them swear that they would take his bones up out of there? Lemor, pakod yifkod, and here we have another repetition. Pakod yifkod Elohim. Okay, so this is usually translated as when God visits you, or when God revisits or remembers. Yifkod is kind of, again, one of these words that's kind of difficult to translate into English. It implies remembering or paying back a promise that was made a long time ago. Often it's translated as visits or revisits. Let's see how the NIV translates it, just for kicks and giggles. So we're in Exodus 13, verse 19. Oops. NIV, or I could even do parallel. No, I could do, parallel. 13, 19, and let's look at both of those verses, and this will be a good mini Hebrew lesson for Marianana Miknana. I think it's something to do with a banana in there somewhere, but I don't know why there's no. It's Marianana Miknana. Banana. Something going on with bananas there. Okay, it's an inside joke. Forget it. All right. Yeah. So where were we? Yeah, we're looking at the various translations. So we're in 13:19. So Moses took the bones of Joseph with him because Joseph had made the Israelites swear an oath. So that's the way that the NIV deals with that repetition. Hashbeah hishbia, swear an oath. But that's a really poor way of dealing with it. Okay. The NLV, Israel swear to do this. Again, poor way of dealing it. Here we go. English Standard Version. Made the sons of Israel solemnly swear. Okay, so that's how they're expressing this repetition. Again, Hashbeah hishbia, because he made them swear. That's the literal translation. Okay, so that's translated here by the English Standard Version, the ESV, as solemnly swear, right? So they're expressing that repetition by adding the word solemnly. There's no way to do it in English, right? You can't say you can't say made them swear. It wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't express the idea in English, okay? Berean Standard Bible, whatever the heck that is. I never heard of that one, but made the sons of Israel swear a solemn oath. So again, they're adding the word solemn, okay? And they're adding the word oath. So really, swear would be the first one, and solemn oath would be the second one, the repetition. You get the idea. Maybe one more. Straightly swear is the King James. Okay, the New King James. Place the children of Israel under a solemn oath. Okay, so that's how the repetition is dealt with in the English, right? And then here we have another repetition. Okay, so what did he make them swear? So this is what Joseph said, saying, meaning it's now quoting what Joseph said to the children of Israel back 200 or so years ago. Okay, pakod yifkod Elohim. So here we have another repetition. Pakod yifkod. We said this word pakod. The underlying root is pakad, pei kuf dalid, means to visit, revisit. It's one of these words. It's very hard to translate into English, but basically what it means is as I said, to kind of remember a promise and make good on that promise at a later time. Okay. So if I say to you, I'm gonna, one of these days, I'm gonna take you to a Broadway play. Okay. And then I totally forget about it, and I don't take you to a Broadway play, and you're just sitting there waiting. When is the dude? He said one day he's going to take you to a Broadway play. When's he going to take me to a Broadway play? And then one day I come home and I say, I've got tickets to a Broadway play. Let's go. Okay, that would be pakod yifkod. That would be pakad. Okay, I made a promise, and then eventually, when the time is right, I came through on that promise, and often it implies a form of revenge, of punishment as well. Pakod yifkod is sometimes translated as punishment or recompense as well. So, but the idea is that there's a certain amount of time that passes, right? So you think it might be forgotten, but eventually it's made good on, and that's exactly the meaning here, right? So Joseph made the children of Israel, solemnly swear, saying, "Pakod yifkod," and we'll talk about the repetition in a second, but Elohim etchem, when God one day will remember you or will recompense you, will fulfill his promise to you. Maybe that's the best way to translate it here, okay? Or again, we'll kind of like repay the Egyptians for what they've done to you, okay? But we'll go with fulfill his promise to you. So one day, when God will, pakod yifkod, will fulfill his promise to you, and you shall bring up my bones out of here with you. Okay, so that's what Joseph said. Joseph said to the children of Israel, one day when God decides to remember you, when God decides to fulfill his promise to you, okay, you will bring up my bones out of here with you. Okay, but it doesn't just say pakod. It doesn't just say it once. It says pakod yifkod. Okay, so again, it's this repetition. Repetition implies emphasis. Okay, so in this case, what is Joseph saying? He's basically saying it will happen one day. Okay, because remember, Joseph lived before hundreds of years before the Exodus, approximately 200 years before the Exodus. So Joseph says to the children of Israel back when he was alive, right, 200 years earlier or so, 200 years or so earlier, he's saying, pakod yifkod Elohim etchem. He's making a statement. In other words, he's basically saying one day God will certainly fulfill his promise to you. And when he does, you shall bring my bones up out of this place with you. That's really the implication. And that's why you have the double in here of pakod yifkod. Okay? When one day God will one day certainly remember his promise that he made to you. And when he does, you will bring my bones up out of here with you. And that's really the way to understand the repetition here, the emphasis. Okay? I'm curious to see how various English translations deal with that. So let's look at Robert Alter for a second. So this is 19, page 657 approximately. $19. Here, God will surely single you out. So he translates it as single you out. Okay. So he's understanding the emphasis much in the same way that I mentioned just now, right? It will happen one day. Joseph is pointing out, see, we have to put in context that this is Joseph saying it hundreds of years before it ever happens, right? Before the Israelites were enslaved. When Joseph was still alive, the Israelites were in very good standing with Egypt, right? Joseph had been the second in command under Pharaoh. The Israelites, Pharaoh had welcomed Jacob and his family down into Egypt with open arms, had settled them in the land of Goshen, had even said, if you have any people who are capable, then bring them to me, and they can have high positions in the government as well. Joseph was number 2 in the government. So the Israelites, when they first came down to Egypt, were in a very, very good situation, right? But so Joseph is basically saying that he understands that this is all going to change, right? Because this had already been told to Abraham earlier, right? And so Joseph knew about it. So Joseph understood that someday that the Israelites will be enslaved, okay, and that one day God will remember them and bring them out of the land, right? So he's pointing that out, right? That one day God will remember you, and when he does, then you take my bones up from here, okay? All right, I think the point is made. Okay, but let's just look very let's just look for a second. So we actually have this in the book of Genesis. So if we go back to Genesis, I think it's the last chapter of Genesis, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, it might be the last couple of verses in Genesis. Genesis 50. I'll just stick with the English for a second. Here. So Genesis chapter 50, 24. This is back in the book of Genesis, right? Just to get the context. Genesis, verse 22, death of Joseph. Joseph stayed in Egypt along with all his father's family. He lived 110 years, and he saw the third generation of Ephraim's children. Also, the children of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were placed on the birth of Joseph's knee. So this was back in the good old days, right? When the Israelites were welcomed and respected and honored in Egypt. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "I'm about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And Joseph made the Israelites swear an oath and said, "God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place." Okay? So Joseph died at the age of 110. So let's look at this in the Hebrew. This is Genesis chapter 50, verse 25. Okay, so Yashbera, Yosef Edmene Israel. So Yosef made the children of Israel swear, saying, and this is what he made them swear: Pakod yifkod Elohim etchem. God will certainly remember you one day. And you shall bring my bones up out of this place, out of here. Okay. Well, that's basically word for word what we see here. This is now back in Exodus chapter 13. Okay. Moshe is saying, Moshe is taking the bones of Joseph out of Egypt. Key. Because Joseph had most solemnly made the children of Israel swear, saying what? Now it's quoting Joseph. Here in Genesis 50, we have Pakod yifkod Elohim etchem v'haletem et atzmotai mizeh. Pakod yifkod Elohim etchem v'haletem et atzmotai mizeh. So it's quoted word for word, except for this extra word etchem. Oops. Okay, from here to here. Okay, this is exactly the same, word for word, the swear, or what Joseph made them swear back in Genesis chapter 50, verse 25. Pakod yifkod Elohim etchem ve'aletem et atzmotai mizeh. Here in Exodus, Moshe, or Exodus quoting what Joseph made them swear, Pakod yifkod Elohim etchem ve'aletem et atzmotai mizeh. Word for word, exactly the same. Okay, the only thing is here is added the word itchem, with you. Okay, so then we can get into a whole discussion about when things are repeated in the Bible. Often there are slight changes or enhancements. So what was originally said and what was changed, hard to tell. Did Joseph originally say the word itchem here and it was just omitted, or is the word itchem, with you, added here? I would guess it's the second one, but it really doesn't matter because repetition, or shall we say paraphrasing, in the Tanakh is almost never word for word. There's always something added, slightly changed, taken away. There's always a slight difference. And we have it here as well because of the addition of the word with you, itchem. But from here to here, it's exactly word for word the same as it was, as Joseph said it back in Genesis chapter 50, verse 25. Okay. Alrighty. Sorry, I am your class clown. I don't know why you say that. I don't know what you mean by that. Okay. So let's close out Genesis. Okay. Verse 20. So now, Wayisu Misukot, and they traveled from Sukkot. Wehnu be'itam b'chatzei midbar. So they traveled from Sukkot and they encamped in Etam on the edge of the wilderness. So last year, I believe we had, let me find it here, journeys. Okay, so we had started cataloging all of this. Let's see if I can make this larger. I should do it here. View, zoom, 125. Okay. Maybe I'll make it a little bit smaller. So it's easier to see. So, okay. So these are the journeys, list of Israel's journeys in the desert. So we have here place name. So the number of the journey, right? The sequence, time of arrival, time of departure, arrival versus departure versus comments. Okay. So Sukkot, we already saw was mentioned in Exodus 12:37. And now we're in Exodus 13:20. And this is where they depart Sukkot and head for the next place, which is Etam. Okay? Exodus 13:20. So we can refer back to that as we go along. Okay, so verse 20, so they traveled from Sukkot and they encamped at Etam at the edge of the desert. So where's this Etam? I have no idea. Probably nobody has any idea, but let's look it up. Etam. Is that guy still around? Etam. It's in Bible. Etam. No, that's Etam. Etam. Spell like that. Yeah. Okay. Biblical figure. A biblical town. Okay. Places. It's the one we want. Oh, wow. No, this is a whole list here, just like I was doing. Oh, well, that's nice. It's better when you do it yourself, though. Okay. Stations of the Exodus. So let's read through this just a little bit. Okay. So the stations of the Exodus are the locations visited by the Israelites following their exodus from Egypt, according to the Hebrew Bible. In the itinerary given in Numbers 33, 42 stations are listed, although this list differs slightly from the narrative account of the journey found in Exodus and Deuteronomy. Okay, let's skip ahead. According to the documentary hypothesis, that's what we mentioned. Documentary hypothesis is the idea that the Torah, the Old Testament, was written by multiple authors and then basically joined into one book. The list of the stations was originally a distinct and separate source text. We won't get into that. We're going to skip this. Locating stations. Attempting to locate many of the stations of the Israelite Exodus is a difficult task, if not infeasible. Though most scholars concede that the narrative of Exodus may have a historical basis, the event in question would have been nothing like the mass emigration and subsequent 40 years of desert nomadism described in the biblical accounts. Okay. If a smaller scale Exodus, we can skip all that. Another factor complicating the issue is that the narrative descriptions of many of the stations lack recognizable distinguishing features or are very broadly defined. For example, Marah, the fifth station, is described only as a place where the Israelites found the drinking water to be exceptionally bitter. The locations of some of the stations are given in relative terms, such as the wilderness of sin, which is simple of sin. By the way, that's not sin like I committed a sin. It's no, it's sin as in with a samach, but it doesn't mean sin. It's just transliterated into the English. Described as the area between Elim and Mount Sinai, given the numerous traditions of the exact location of Mount Sinai, the location of the wilderness of sin cannot be positively determined. Other locations central to the narrative, such as the Sea of Reed and Ramses, also lack positive identification, making it more difficult to plot a plausible map of the Israelites' journey. As such, proposed identifications of the stations of the Exodus are almost entirely conjectural, right? So that's what I said. Nobody knows where any of these places are. It's a lot of conjecture going on. Nonetheless, let's look at Etam, just for the heck of it. So there's no Wikipedia article for Etam itself. So description: on the edge of the wilderness, as we said, and unknown, possibly close to modern-day Ismailia. Okay, who knows, right? Where's Ismailia? Let's just, for the heck of it, look up Ismailia. So there it is. It seems like right where the Red Sea or the Gulf of Suez kind of just basically narrows. Okay. Just a picture of it. Looks like a nice place. Maybe I'll visit. I've never been to Egypt. I should go one of these days. All right. So who knows where it is, right? That's the point, really. But it is on the edge of the desert or the wilderness. Verse 21, Yahweh holech lifnehem yomam bi'amud anan lan hutam haderech laila bi'amud ish liha'ir lahem lalechet yomam walayla. So Yahweh went before them during the day, bi'amud anan, with a pillar of cloud, lan chotam derech, to show them the way, to lead them along the way, with laila bi'amud ish, and at night with a pillar of fire, la'ir lehem lalechet yomam v'layla, in order to shine light on them so that they can go both day and night. Okay, so we have this pillar of cloud, this pillar of cloud during the day, this pillar of fire at night, and this will be mentioned many more times throughout the Torah. Okay. Lo yamish amud hanan yomam ve'amud ha'esh laila lifnei ha'am, and the pillar of cloud, as well as the pillar of fire, or the pillar of cloud during the day and the pillar of fire at night, did not remove itself from before the people. Did not remove itself from before the people. Period. Right. So, in other words, it was always there throughout their journeys. Okay. And lots of interesting things to say about this, but we'll wait until we get to it. Okay. So that's the end of the book of. The end of chapter 13. Any questions? Any comments before we go on? Hello, Ricky and April Scurry. Nice to see you guys. Any questions? Any comments? No? All right. Then let's go on to chapter 14. And Pharaoh, once again, relents after the Israelites are already gone, right? Just give me 1 minute. I'm going to put on music for just 2 minutes. I just want to grab some water, take a breather, and I will be back within 5 minutes or so, okay? So I put up some music. Let's go with, sure.
משוך עבדך אל רצונך, ירוץ עבדך כמו איה, ישתחווה אל מול הדרך, ירב לו ידידותיך מנופת צוף וכל טעם, הדור נאה סביב העולם, נפשי חולת אהבתך, אוי אנא כאל נא, אוי רפנה לה, והראות לה נועם זיווך, אז תתחזק ותתרפא, והייתה לה שמחת עולם. ועתיק ועתיק ימונה רחמך, וחוסנה על בן אהובך, אוי כי זה כמה מכסוף נחשפתי, אות מהרה בתפארת עוזך, אלה חמדה ליבי וחוסנה ואל תתעלם, יגלה נא ופרוס חביבי עליי את סוכת שלומך, אוי תאיר ארץ בלי כבודך, נגילה ונשמחה מהראהו כי במועד וכוננו כימי עולם, וכוננו כימי עולם. יוסף בן פורתה לעין, בן פורת 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 יוסף בן פורתה לעין, אנא מזרעה ביוסף קעתינה, דלא שלתה בעינה באישה, שנאמר בן פורתה לעין, אל תקרא לעין אלא עולה לעין, אנא מזרעה ביוסף קעתינה, דלא שלתה בעינה באישה, שנאמר בן פורתה לעין, אל תקרא לעין אלא עולה לעין, בן פורת יוסף בן פורתה 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 לעין. אנא מזרעה ביוסף קעתינה, דרשת בעין אבישה, שנאמר בן פורת לעין, אל תקרא לעין, אלא עולה לעין. אנא מזרעה ליוסף כעתידה, דרשת בעין אבישה, שנאמר בן פורת לעין, אל תקרא לעין, אלא עולה לעין. בן פורת יוסף, בן פורת לעין, 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 בן פורת יוסף. ידיד נפש אהבה רחמה בשוך עבדך.
Okay. Welcome back. Oops. I have a cat on the computer. Woo-hoo. All right. Welcome back to the World Alliance of Qara'im study. And once again, this is Hakham Melech Ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im. And let me just share the screen. I'm going to try to let my cat stay in here. Our cat, about 2 months ago, got injured in a cat fight with another male cat. So he's had this stupid cone on his head for about 2 months, but finally today we took it off. It was a whole mess because the sore got irritated. Got infected, and it was a whole big mess. But finally, the cone is off, so he's a little bit happier. And so we'll let him go. Another couple of days, we're going to go back out again. It's a great cat. We found him when he was a little kitten. No, let's hope not. Here, come say hi, Lavi. Come, this is Lavi. Lavi! This is Chacham Lavi. He's a very, very smart cat. Right? Are you the Einstein of kitty cats? Are you the Einstein of kitty cats? No? No, go.
You look at the etymology of Latin.
Okay. So, all right. Where were we? So we were in. Okay, so we're in the beginning of Exodus chapter 14. Waidaber Yahweh el Moshe lemor. Okay, Yahweh spoke to Moshe and said, Daber el bnei Israel, wa yashuvu, wa yahnu lifnei pi achirot ben migdol, uben ayam, lifnei ba'al tzafon, nikaho, tahanu alayam. Okay, so speak to the children of Israel that they should turn back. V'yahanu lifnei pi achirot, and they should camp before pi achirot, wherever that is. Ben Migdal, between Migdol and the sea. Okay, between Migdol and the sea. Before Baal Tzafon. Across from it, or nochach, like next to it, across from it, tachanu al hayam. You shall camp on the sea. So again, nobody knows where any of these things are. But what can we maybe glean from here? All right, so verse 2, they should turn back and camp by Piachirot, so between Migdol and between the sea. So what sea are we talking about here first? Okay, well, we're obviously, the sea that's going to split is going to be the Sea of Reeds, the Red Sea. So clearly it's speaking about the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds. Red Sea is a misnomer. And so remember, they traveled from Sukkot. They traveled from Egypt out to Sukkot. Then they camped at this place, Etam, on the edge of the desert, but they hadn't crossed the Red Sea. Wherever they were right now, they had not crossed the Red Sea, right? They couldn't have crossed the Red Sea because it's a sea and it hadn't split yet, right? So they're probably maybe, right, if they're going to be camping up against the sea. Okay, so maybe they went, wait, where's the map? Right, so maybe they went like in this direction here, and now they're told to come back and camp towards the sea. So maybe they're heading now down south somewhere. It's not really clear. As we know, a lot of these place names are, it's not known. But what we do know is that they camped between this place Migdol and between the sea. And they encamped near the sea. So they're somewhere on the coast of the Sea of Reeds, somewhere on the coast of the Red Sea at this point. Where? Who knows? Again, maybe we can look at Wikipedia and look at some of these places. So Etam, so Piachirot. I guess we can click on the Wikipedia article here and see if anybody wants to speculate as to where this is, right? So it's the fourth station of the Exodus. The fifth and sixth stations, Marah and Elim, are located on the Red Sea. The biblical books Exodus and Numbers refer to Piachirot as the place where the Israelites encamped between Migdol and the sea opposite Baal Tzafon, while awaiting an attack by Pharaoh prior to crossing the Red Sea. Reaching Piachirot involved turning back from the direction they had been traveling, that's what we just saw right now, and going south directly opposite God's preferred proximate destination of Kadesh Barnea at the entrance to the Philistine territory, which was done in order to gain time to boost the morale of the Israelites. Their ultimate destination was the Abrahamic city of Hebron, east of the Philistine capital, Gaza. Oops. Right. So, yeah, we're not going to dig into all of these different things, but it's kind of like what we said, right? If we look at the map, that turning back, so they went over here. They were heading towards Israel, okay? But remember, God did not want to lead them straight along the coast. Derech HaPlishtim, he didn't want to lead them on the road of to the Philistines. So he led them out to Sukkot and then to Etam, out on the edge of the wilderness. Maybe that's somewhere around here, like kind of in the general direction. But then instead of continuing up here, then they went south, and they're going to end up camping along the Red Sea, which is going to split, and then that's going to lead them ostensibly into the Sinai Peninsula. I think some say straight across here, or even into Saudi Arabia. But that's what we got. Okay, so verse 3. Wa amar paro livnei Israel nivuchim hem ba'aretz sagar alehem midbar. So Pharaoh sees that they turn back, right? That's the idea here of oyashuvu uyachanu lifnei pichirot. So they were heading north, and then they turned back, and apparently started heading south, right, along the Red Sea. And then Pharaoh took this to understand. So now Pharaoh's heart, again, is hardened, or is, I got to find a good word for ichsakti, strengthened. It's not hardened. It would be I don't know, made durable, made impenetrable. I don't know. Chazak means to make strong, right? They translate as hardened, but it's a bad translation. I haven't thought in my head of a good one. But at any rate, so Pharaoh sees this. He sees that they're turning back, right? And he sees Amar Livnei Israel. So Pharaoh said regarding the children of Israel, Nivuchim heim, they're lost, or they're stuck, they're confused. Okay. In modern Hebrew, a mavoch is a maze. Okay. The book, whatchamacallit? Moreh Nivuchim. Yeah, the Guide for the Perplexed is how they translate into English. Is a book by the medieval Jewish scholar, the Rambam, basically a book of medieval Jewish philosophy, and in Hebrew that's Moreh Nivuchim, which means the guide, the guide to the perplexed, right? That's the way they translate it. But so that's the same word as here, Moreh Nivuchim. Nivuchim, perplexed, lost, bewildered, confused. So Pharaoh sees that the children of Israel are confused, are perplexed, are lost in him ba'aretz, in the land. In this case, maybe still referring to the land of Egypt, or just to in the land in general. What do you want, Paul? Yeah. You really want the other heater on? Okay, go ahead.
Well, you have the heater on you.
Fine, turn it on. So Gadar Le'ama Midbar, and the desert has enclosed upon them, has closed around them, basically. Okay, basically they're confused and trapped out in the desert. Okay, so he sees, right, they're lost, they're confused, they're trapped, they're stuck in the desert. He sees this as a perfect opportunity to once again go after them. Okay, so even though now his entire nation has been destroyed, even though he hurried the children of Israel out, told them, get the heck out, okay, take everything, pray to God for me, right? Even after all of that, after his firstborn, all the firstborn of Egypt were destroyed, he's still, once he sees that Israel was stuck, he goes back to his old ways still. Once again, it's almost like this is the 11th plague in a sense, right? Where he's drowned in the sea eventually, right? He still doesn't get the idea. After all of these plagues, even after he let the children of Israel go. But, well, what are you doing? Well, stay. No, it's fine. Just let him stay. Unless he starts wandering back and forth and howling, then just let him be. And I've made strong, I've made impenetrable the heart of Pharaoh. And he will, so this is now God speaking, right? So I will make impenetrable the heart of Pharaoh, but and he will chase after you. And I will be glorified before Paro and before all of his army. And Egypt will know that I am Yahweh, and so they will do. Okay. So basically, again, we see that the reason. So we see again that God is making impenetrable or making strong the heart of Pharaoh. Strong is the wrong translation. I'll go with making impenetrable, making obstinate, but obstinate really means hard, right? I don't know. I can't think of a good English translation. How does Robert Alter translate it? This is Exodus 14:4. Toughen Pharaoh's heart. That's a good one. Let's see how Everett Fox translates it. So this will be around 80. 75. Okay. Strong-willed. Okay, that's good. I like that. Toughen or strong-willed. We'll go with toughen. I will toughen the heart of Pharaoh. Okay. And will chase after them. I will become glorified through Pharaoh. Okay, or in Pharaoh, maybe in Pharaoh's eyes, and all of his, well, really means through Pharaoh and all of his army, right? In other words, God's doing it once again. So God is up to his same old, tricks. It's kind of a disrespectful way of saying it. He's doing what he's been doing all along, right? Which is he's going to toughen the heart of Pharaoh, and he's going to use that as a way God is going to use that as a way for him to glorify himself, for himself to be glorified. In this case, it says explicitly that it's going to be for Egypt to know that Ki Ani Yahweh, that Egypt should know that I am Yahweh, right? But also by extension, of course, this makes the glory of God, or this glorifies God in the eyes of everyone, in the eyes of the entire world, right? Because this story is going to get out. Okay. Verse 5. Should we get a little commentary on verse 4? All right, so let's go with Robert Alter. I don't want to focus too much on Robert Alter, but he's easy, he's accessible, he's insightful. So that's usually my go-to. Okay, the Hebrew word ikabda, as anyone reading the story in the original would notice, plays on the same word kaved, heavy, that has been repeatedly used for the severity of the plagues, the hardness of Pharaoh's heart, and the density of the Israelites' livestock. Okay, fair enough. Verse 5. And it was told to the king of Egypt that the people had fled, meaning the Israelites had fled. Okay, what do you mean it was told to the king of Egypt? He was the one who threw them out, right? So someone told him that they fled? Well, maybe it was confirmed. These people are gone. Or maybe it means, that someone reminded him, hey, Pharaoh, remember you threw the people of Israel out and now they're stuck in the desert? That same idea is maybe pakod, like to remind someone of, and so that they take action based on that reminder, right? As we said before, if you remember that word. Okay. At any rate, I just clicked on that by mistake. We have yehafech levav paro ve'avadal ela'am, and the heart of Pharaoh was overturned, right? Was turned around, or literally overturned. Yefech means literally to overturn. It's mentioned with his ministers, basically. Okay, ela'am, regarding the people, meaning regarding the people of Israel. And they said, what have we done? What is this we have done? In that we have freed Israel from our servitude, from serving us, from being our slaves, right? So again, it's the same thing we've been mentioning now for a number of weeks, right? The second that Pharaoh gets a little bit of a respite, the second he can take a breath, then he already relents. He already goes back to his old stubborn ways. And even now, after the 10th plague, after the firstborn has been destroyed, after Egypt is basically in shambles, in ruins, still, he cannot get it out of his head. It's like an obsession, okay? That he just cannot let Israel go. Because to let Israel go, basically, as we spoke about in previous parshiot, in previous weeks, means that he's admitting the superiority of the God of Israel, of Yahweh. And he can't do that, okay? Because it's the end of his whole his whole way of life, his whole way of seeing the world. Okay, if he has to admit that the God of Israel, that Yahweh, the God of Israel, is real, is the most powerful God, and I say that in quotes because there is no other God, but in his eyes is more powerful than the gods of Egypt, which he probably still believes in. Okay, then his whole worldview is shattered. Right, his entire worldview, his entire life is built on the idea that Egypt is superior. Okay, that no country is better than Egypt, that Egypt is the greatest country in the history of the world. Does that one sound familiar? Americans, right? We all grew up hearing that, right? There's been no greater country in the history of the world than the United States of America. Our ways are great. In fact, they're so great that we have to send armies and use economics to force our ways on other people, on other countries, like let's say Afghanistan, even when they want nothing to do with it. Or the list is almost endless. Or let's say Serbia, or whatever the various countries that the United States has forcibly caused to bow to its will, right? So if the United States loses badly, then in a sense they'll have to admit, Americans or America will have to admit that its ways are wrong. Its ways did not produce victory, right? Even though America has never won a war since World War II. And even then they didn't do it alone, right? But America has except maybe against Grenada, right? But America has not won a war since World War II. So all they've done is lose, but still they're so stubborn, like Pharaoh, they think that their ways are the only ways, that America is the greatest country in the history of the world, because Americans have no view of history. They're very, as I always like to say, they're historically myopic. They don't understand history. They don't even understand geography, okay? They think Portugal is part of Spain or something like that, many Americans, okay? For instance. So, but I digress. But the point is that this is now a battle of worldviews, okay? And if Pharaoh is to admit defeat, then he's not just admitting defeat of himself and his army. He's admitting defeat of his gods, of his culture, of his country, of his worldview, of his entire worldview. I think this is the 10th time I've used the word worldview. Of his entire worldview, number 11, that he's built not only throughout his entire life, but that he has inherited from pharaohs before him, right? So it's admittance of everything that he and his nation stand for are wrong and incorrect and bankrupt. So he still can't bring himself to do it. Any chance he gets, he just goes back on it. So Mariana McDonough says U.S. and crap. I mean, I grew up, I love the U.S., right? I was extremely patriotic, and there's a side of me that's still patriotic to this day and still loves the U.S., but it's just become such a cesspool and such a shallow shell of what it once was that it's really hard to love it. And you see, as I mentioned last week, you see that the leaders of the United States, their hearts are being hardened, right? They're being drawn into something which is way out of their league, which is bigger than they can deal with, and they even know. And in their arrogance, it's just like Pharaoh. In their arrogance, their heart is just hardened over and over again. Even defeat after defeat after defeat, they just cannot admit that maybe they're wrong and maybe their way of seeing the world is wrong. Yes, it's it's okay to cut breasts off 14-year-old girls because they wake up one day and say they want to be a boy, when the next year they'll outgrow that phase and whatever, all the crap that goes on in the United States. But the United States just cannot admit that it's wrong, and it pushes it further and further and further until it's gonna meet its own defeat one way or another. And this arrogance is the same kind of arrogance that Pharaoh has, right? They're so sure of themselves and their own stupidity and their own short-sightedness and their own arrogance that they don't realize they're being dragged into something that is going to lead to their own destruction. As we quoted last week, the phrase that when God wants to destroy something or someone, first he makes them crazy. Okay? It's really very similar. It's really very similar. Not the same as it was, sadly. Lives by the beast system. Yep. Okay. And it gets more and more deranged in the United States. I mean, it's what's even next? I mean, right? Even 10 years ago, this whole tranny thing was just, it wasn't acceptable, right? It was like a new thing, and now it's mainstream, right? That teenagers and children are choosing whether they want to be a boy or a girl, and they're having surgeries done based on that. It's sick, and it's going to get only sicker because these things grow exponentially, right? 10 years ago, we weren't even talking about this stuff, and now that's all you hear. It's insanity. And the United States just can't see it. The leaders can't see it. They are blind, like Pharaoh. right? Their hearts are being hardened even after the defeat after defeat, right? Defeat in Afghanistan, defeat in, I don't know, I already lost track of all the places that the United States had to withdraw from, and they're going to lose in the Ukraine as well. There's no doubt about that. They're going to get their asses kicked in the Ukraine one way or another, and still their hearts will be hardened, right? The second they have the opportunity to push their increasingly sick culture on the rest of the world, they'll just do it. It's insanity, really. Verse 9, we have the Mitzrayim acharehem, and Egypt chased after them. We yasigu otam chonim al hayam, and caught up to them as they were camping on the sea. So they caught up to him, all of the, as they were encamping on the sea. In other words, the Israelites were encamping on the sea. So where were they? They were at Piachirot, this place Piachirot. So all of his horses and his chariots and his horsemen, equestrians, and all of his army. So basically the entire army of Pharaoh caught up to the Israelites as they were camping on the sea. And this is good news for Pharaoh because he thinks he has them trapped, right? They're pressed up against the sea. They don't have horses and chariots and armies and all of this kind of stuff. It does say that the Israelites went hamushim out of Egypt. They went armed, but it's not even clear 100% what that means. So Pharaoh really thinks finally he's got them this time. They're pressed up against the sea, right? Verse 10, Pharaoh akriv wa isu bnei Yisrael et ainehem wa hine Mitzrayim nosea acharehem wa yiru me'od wa yitz'aku bnei Yisrael el Yahweh. So Pharaoh came close. He encroached upon them, or he drew close to them. Isu bnei Yisrael et ainehem, and the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and this is the biblical way of saying took notice of, like they suddenly noticed. That behold, there was Egypt, chasing after them or coming after them. And they feared greatly. And the children of Israel cried out to Yahweh. So they cried out to God. Verse 11, and Moshe. So they said to Moshe, לקחתנו למות במדבר, מה זאת עשית לנו להוציאנו ממצרים? And they said to Moshe, and here we start with the complaining to Moshe, right? They've already complained a little bit. They complained. When did they complain? The first time we saw them complain was when Moshe came to free them, and instead their situation became worse because Pharaoh said that they're lazy and that they have to now go out and gather their own straw to make the bricks, and they still have to come up with the same quota of bricks each day. And so they complained to Moshe and Aaron and said, "What did you do? What have you done? You've made our situation worse. You've made us I think the phrase was, you made our smell stink before Pharaoh to put a sword in his hand to kill us." Right? You've made us an eyesore. You've put us in danger by pissing us off to Pharaoh, making us pissed off in the eyes. I don't know. You get the idea. So now here's the second complaint to the children of Israel. So they said to Moshe, is it because there were no graves in Egypt that you took us to die? You took us out here to die in the desert, right? So typical kind of like snide. I hate to say it, but snide. You'd hear kind of thing you'd hear from Israelis today, right? It's the same kind of like Jewish kind of too intelligent for their own good, too stubborn for their own good, and too snide for their own good. Okay, so it's that same. You could totally hear an Israeli saying that to you today, right? Is it because there were no graves in Egypt that you took us out into the desert to die? What is this you've done to us? Taking us out of Egypt. So now even the Israelites are regretting that they've been taken out of Egypt, just as we saw earlier. That's the very reason that God decided not to lead them on Derech HaFlishtim, on the road up to the territory of the Philistines, because he was afraid that they would run into battles and they would run back and they would turn back to Egypt. Well, this is exactly what's happening here, right? The Egyptians chase after them; they're pressed up against the sea, and the Israelites are saying, what are you doing? Why did you even take us out of Egypt? It's better it would have been better that if we'd stayed in Egypt. It's exactly as was predicted. Okay, verse 12. is not this just exactly as we spoke to you in Egypt. Lemor, dal mimenu. Let me read the whole verse in Hebrew and then I'll translate it. Is this not the very thing we said to you in Egypt when we said, leave us alone, let us be, and let us serve Egypt, because it's better for us to serve Egypt than die here in this desert. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that's the idea. Okay, so it's exactly as was predicted, right? That the Israelites are going to get scared and want to run back to Egypt, right back into the matrix, because the matrix is easy, it's comfortable, it's what they know. They have their food every day. It's like a jail cell, right? You get your 3 meals a day. You get a warm place to sleep where I don't know if it's warm. I've never been in jail, but in theory, warm. Actually, I was in jail once. Yes, I was. I was in jail for about an hour. I had committed the horrible crime of riding my bicycle on the sidewalk, and I didn't have my ID on me, and so I kind of wised off to the cop, and he said, "Okay, you come with us to the station," and they threw me in jail for an hour, which was a very interesting experience. And until they were able to positively ID me, and then they let me go and gave me a couple of tickets, and then they were dismissed. Anywho, neither here nor there. So yes, I've been in jail. Confessions of the True Housewives. No, not a housewife. The True Housewives of what? Queens? I don't know. Okay. Yahweh yilachem lachem ve'atem tarishun. Okay, where were we? I'm sorry. Skip. Verse 13. Wayomer Moshe el ha'am al tira'u hityatzvu v'ra'u et yeshuat Yahweh asher ya'aseh lechem hayom ki asher ra'item et Mitzrayim hayom lo tosifu lir'otam od ad olam. So then Moshe basically reassures them. Okay, so Moshe basically says, "Hey, just chill out. We got this under control." Okay, Moshe said to the people, "Do not fear. Stay in your place. Just stand still. Yahweh, and behold the salvation of Yahweh." I will point out that Yeshuat, for those of you who come from a Christian background, right? The Hebrew name for Jesus is Yeshua or Yehoshua, right, which comes from the same root, right? Yesha, Yud, Shin, Ayin means to save or salvation, right? I should also point out that I am not in any way, shape, or form a Christian or a Messianic. Never have been, never will be. Have no belief in Jesus, not as God, Son of God, Messiah, or anything else like that. And I always need to point that out because, unfortunately, there's one Karaite who's gone out into the world and who has, shall we say, interacted with the Christians to the point that, unfortunately, sometimes Karaism or the belief has come that Karaites may have some kind of belief in Jesus. But I don't, never have, never will. But I will point out that yes, the name Jesus in Hebrew is Yeshua, which is related to this same verb right here, Yeshuat, Yahweh, the salvation of Yahweh, and the name basically means it's related to this idea of salvation. The same as Joshua, right? It's the same name actually, right? The same as Joshua, the assistant, Joshua bin Nun, Joshua the son of Nun, the assistant of Moses is named Yeshua originally, and then his name is changed to Yehoshua, and it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same name. Okay. Any rate, the salvation of Yahweh, asher ya'aseh lechem hayom ki asher ra'item. So stand still and behold the salvation of Yahweh, asher ya'aseh lechem hayom, which He shall do for you today. Ki asher ra'item et Mitzrayim hayom, because as you see Egypt today, or though you are seeing Egypt today, lo tosifu lir'otam od ad olam. You will never ever see them again for the rest of eternity. This is the last time you'll ever see them. Okay, I'm paraphrasing. Literally, it says, "Lo tosifu lir'otam." You will not once again see them, or you will not continue to see them again ad olam until the end of time. Okay, until the earth, for the rest of the for the rest of the earth's history. Okay, that's a more literal translation. Yahweh yelachem lachem ve'atem taharishun. Yahweh will fight for you, and you remain still, remain quiet. Okay. Okay, verse 15. ויאמר יהוה אל משה מה תצעק אליי דבר אל בני ישראל וייסעו. And now we have a conversation between Yahweh and Moshe. So Moshe went and reassured them, okay, saying, don't worry, stay still, don't do anything. God's going to fight for you. You're never going to see Egypt again. But apparently Moshe then goes to God and says, hey, God, dude, like, what's the deal here, man? You know? Am I being a little bit disrespectful to God? I hope not. So, right, that's because we have a response here. Yahweh says to Moshe, Mati Takala, why are you yelling at me? Okay, so apparently Moshe went to God and said, listen, I just told these people that everything's going to be all right and they're never going to see Egypt again, but what the heck is going on here, right? And so God responds. We don't see that conversation, but God responds, Mati Takala, why are you yelling at me? The better ben Israel, v'yisa'u. Speak to the children of Israel and tell them to move, to get going. And so Moshe is thinking at this time, what the heck are you talking about? What do you mean get going? Egypt is on one side of them, the Sea of Reeds, the Red Sea is on the other side. They're trapped up against the Sea of Reeds. Moshe is probably thinking to himself, again, I'm extrapolating here, but he's probably thinking, so what do you mean get going? Get going where? We have nowhere to go. We're pressed up against the sea and the Egyptians are coming at us, right? And so then the answer to that obvious question is in verse 16. But let's get a little commentary first. All right, we'll do Robert Alter. And then maybe we'll check some other commentaries. Verse 15. Okay. Right, so here, this is what Robert Alter says. Why do you cry out to me? This is a little puzzling because there has been no report of Moses' crying out to the Lord. Ooh, I got to go plug in. The least strange solution is that of Abraham ibn Ezra, who argues that since Moses is the spokesman of the people, if the people cry out, God can readily attribute the crying out to Moses. So I love Ibn Ezra. We've looked at Ibn Ezra many times, but I don't agree with that, okay? I think that what's going on is that there was a conversation between God and Moses, that it's just not recorded, right? It's just implied or it's understood based on the response that God gives to Moses. Just give me 1 second here. I'm just gonna turn off the sound for 1 second. I have to go grab my my charger, because the battery is about to go dead on the computer. Be right back. Okay, I'm back. So I disagree with Robert Alter here. Let's go for another commentary here. And we could try Rabbi Dr. Hertz. I like his commentary. So as I always point out, this is the Pentateuch I grew up with in my conservative synagogue that my parents dragged me to against my will when I was a child. And all I did was just make trouble and wait for the kiddush, the food after the services. Okay, so so now we've got to find Exodus 14. This might be a bit of a stretch. Let's try. Exodus 1. Not a bad guess. Let's try here. Exodus 10. Exodus 20. So I overshot the landing pad. Let's try here. Exodus 15. We're getting there. Exodus 14. Okay, so we're in Exodus. So this was 14:15. Exodus 14:15. So this works strange. There we go. Exodus 14:15. So I can't highlight here, as I pointed out, so you just have to follow along. Okay, over here on the right. And the Lord said unto Moses, wherefore criest thou unto me? Speak unto the children of Israel that they may go forward. So let's see if Dr. Rabbi Hertz has any commentary on that. So he says in verse 15, wherefore criest thou, that moment of anguish called for not for prayer, but for action. Okay, well, it doesn't really relate to the issue at hand, or the issue that we were considering, but no big deal. We could go check out the Ibn Ezra, but there's no need because Robert Alter just quoted the Ibn Ezra, so we know what his opinion is on that. So I again say there's a conversation that went on between God and Moses. And we have precedence for that because we saw that the first time that that Moshe spoke to the Israelites or spoke to Pharaoh, that when Pharaoh made the situation worse, the Israelites complained to Moshe, and then Moshe went and complained to God. And he actually said to God again, what are you doing here? You've made the situation worse, and I don't want this job anyway. I never wanted this job, and now you're putting me in trouble, even into more trouble, right? We won't go back and look at that, right? So there's precedence for after the Israelites complained to Moshe, that Moshe goes and complains to God. So I think that's what's happened here, even though it's not stated explicitly. All right, let's go on to verse 16. And again, I'll just stop and say any comments, any questions? Anybody? No. Okay, then we will move on. Verse 16. We ata harim et matcha u nete et yadcha al hayam u bi qa'ehu we ya'vu bnei Israel bitoch hayam ba ya basha. Again, I'm trying to stick to as much of a, shall we say, Tiberian Judean or Tiberian Hebrew accent as possible. That's what many scholars believe it is. So excuse me if I'm going a little bit slow when I read in the Hebrew, but I'm trying to perfect the accent. Okay. If I were just reading it in modern Hebrew, which I don't like to do, then it would be like more like V'ata harem et matcha v'netet yadcha al hayam v'bakeu v'yaviu b'nei Yisrael b'toch hayam v'yabasha. But I don't want to do that. I'm trying to perfect the various sounds of the consonants as well as the vowels. So it really sounds more like we ata harem et matcha v'netet et yadcha al hayam v'bakeu. There's an I in there. Ayin is guttural. Ayehu. We ya'vu b'nei Yisrael b'toch hayam be'ya basha. Okay. At any rate, so So God says, I'm sorry. So yeah, God says to Moshe, what are you sitting here yelling at me? Get moving, dude. Come on, let's go. And Moshe's like, again, I think there's an implied conversation here. So Moshe's like, what do you mean get moving? Get moving where? The Egyptians are on one side, the sea's on the other side, right? And then God answers. That's verse 16 is the answer to that question or that complaint. Raise up your staff. This is the same staff that's been used for all of the plagues, almost all of the plagues, right? When it take et yadcha layam, and stretch out your hand upon the sea, and split it in half, and split it, right? And the children of Israel will go into the sea on dry land. So that's what God answering, right? So the conversation is Israel complains to Moshe, right? He said, "Why were there no graves back in Egypt that you had to bring us out into the desert to kill us?" Right? And Moshe says, "Calm down. We got everything under control. You stay quiet. God's going to fight for us." Then Moshe goes to God and says, "God, what are you doing here? I just told the children of Israel to calm down. I wanted to calm them down, but we're in a what's going on here?" And then you've done it again to me. You've really put me in a bad position. And then God says, "What are you yelling at me? Get moving." And then Moshe responds, "Get moving where? What are you talking about?" And then verse 16 answers, "You have a staff, don't you? You have a hand, don't you? Stretch it out over the sea, split it in half, and let the children of Israel go on the dry land." So I think that's the narrative, the implicit narrative that's going on here. It's basically a conversation between the children of Israel and then between the children of Israel and Moshe and God. Okay? Verse 17, Vani hineni mihazik et lev Misraim wa ya v'u acharehem wa ikbabdan b'far'o u'b'chol helo b'richbo u'b'parashao. Okay, and behold, I will again make strong. What was it? Make what was the translation that that Robert Alder used? Make now I gotta look it up. 17, 14, 17. Toughen, that was it, right? That's what I'm going to use. Okay, so I will toughen the heart of Pharaoh, of the heart of Egypt, and they will come after them, meaning the Egyptians will come after the Israelites, and I will gain glory through Pharaoh and through all his army, including his chariots and his horsemen, right? So basically, again, God is going to use this opportunity, right, to gain glory. How's he going to gain glory? Because he's going to make a miracle happen. It's going to be clear that God is fighting. This will be said explicitly, that God is fighting for the Israelites and fighting against the Egyptians. And so then God gets the glory for the victory. Okay? Verse 18, Yadu Misraim ki ani Yahweh bihi odi bifar'o birichbo u biparashao. And Egypt shall know that I am Yahweh when I gain glory, when I am glorified through Pharaoh, through his chariots and through his horsemen. Okay, so it's again just what we said. Okay, so again, Egypt will know. So the issue here seems to be that, and we saw this in the plagues too, that God wants Egypt to know who he is. And I think the idea is that if Egypt, once again, who at the beginning Pharaoh wouldn't even recognize the existence, right? Pharaoh said to Moshe, "Get away, you and your little imaginary friend, this guy, get away from me. I'm not letting the people go," right? But so if Egypt recognizes the existence of Yahweh and the strength, the superiority of Yahweh over any and all other imaginary gods that don't even exist, then that's a paradigm for the entire world, right? That the entire world can be brought to their knees and proclaiming the glory of the name of God, right? Proclaiming the glory of Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the God of Israel, right? And that's what is going to happen in the end, one way or another. Yeah, really. That's I don't know if you were here before, Lucian Janusum, but it's exactly what I said. All right. So Lucian Janusum, who I still am not sure who that is, says the whole story is so Israeli. Moshe literally saves the lives of the nation, frees them all, only for them to complain. I said exactly that, and of course the management was bad. So he has to let everyone know it wasn't my plan, and brings it up with God. Yeah, totally. Yomer Moshe nu mani aseh zot זה לא הבעיה שלי. Totally. Actually, I said earlier that this phrase here, I don't know if you're here when I mentioned it, but when the Israelites complain to Moshe and they say, where was it? ויאמרו אל משה, המבלי אין כפרים במצרים לקחתנו למות במדבר, מה זאת עשית לנו להוציאנו ממצרים? And you could totally picture like every Israeli on planet Earth saying that to you today, right? That's like the most Israeli thing to say, right? מבלי אין כפרים במצרים, לקחתנו למות במדבר הזה, זאת עשית לנו, להוציאנו ממצרים. טמבל, מה עשית לנו? Right? You could totally picture every Israeli on planet Earth saying that. Nothing has changed. In 3,000 years, this nation has not changed a drop. They're still the same stubborn, obnoxious, too smart for their own good, nation that they were 3,000 years ago. What can I say? It's the truth. Yet I'm still a proud member of that nation for some strange reason. I haven't figured out why yet, but I am. Okay, so where are we? Right, so we're in verse 18. Yeah, we're in verse 19. Okay, so verse 19. ויסע מלאך אלוהים ההולך לפני מחנה ישראל, וילך מאחריהם, ויסע עמוד הענן מפניהם, יעמוד מאחריהם. So, okay, so remember we saw in Exodus, where was it? 13, verse 20, no, verse 21, right? So this is the first mention of this, the pillar of clouds and the pillar of fire, right? So let's just read that verse again so we can see what's going on here. Okay? ויחווה הולך לפניהם יומם בעמוד ענן לנפם הדרך ולילה בעמוד אש להאיר להם ללכת יומם ולילה, right? So we have a pillar of cloud that's going where? הולך לפניהם, that's going before them, right? So this pillar of cloud is leading them on their journeys, okay? During the day, and at night it's בעמוד אש, it's a pillar of fire, right? So the pillar of cloud is in front of them, leading them. They follow the pillar of cloud during the day. At night, they follow the pillar of fire. Okay, so now what's happening here, just to get that in perspective, in spatial perspective. Oops, where were we? Right. So ויסע מלאך אלוהים ההולך לפני מחנה ישראל. So the messenger of God, the angel that was going before the camp of Israel, moved, literally traveled, but moved, and went behind them, right? And the pillar of cloud that was traveling in front of them went and moved and stood behind them, right? So instead of being in front of the children of Israel and the children of Israel following them, now it goes behind. Why? We're going to see in a second. But what's with the angel, right? We don't hear anything about an angel. What is this angel that is going before them, right? We only heard before about a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire. We didn't hear anything about an angel. So what can we assume? We can assume maybe that the pillar of cloud is an angel, or there's an angel inside the pillar of cloud, right? We've spoken many times about this interplay between Yahweh and the angel of Yahweh, God and the angel of God. That basically, when there's communication, it's basically an angel, but it will say sometimes that God said, but it's really an angel doing it or saying it. Okay, and let's just keep an eye on this, because this will come up in later parshiot. Okay, that we have this angel and this cloud. First mention of this angel. Okay, but let's just keep in mind that this angel is somehow there. Okay, this messenger of God. All right, verse 20. I wonder if Robert Alter has anything to say about that one. 19. Just out of curiosity. Oh, that's Rashi. We don't waste our time with him. He's a moron. Okay, the messenger of God. Okay. So in the initial report of the pillars, the introduction of an agent of the deity here is either an explanation in the original narrative of what God's presence before the people actually meant, or an interpolation of later tradition in order to mitigate the anthropomorphism. So we don't go with that. That's, documentary hypothesis, this idea of the later writing and the canonization of the Torah. So we're not going with that one. That's purely out of the academic world, okay? But the agent of the deities here is either an explanation of the original narrative. So let's go again. Let's look back at the original narrative for a second. So here it said, Yahweh holech lifneim yomam be'amud anan, nanchotam b'derech v'layla be'amud esh. Right? So God went before them. Okay? But again, what I'm trying to point out here is that God and angel of God are often used interchangeably throughout the entire Torah, throughout the entire Tanakh. You could see one sentence will say God said, and the next sentence it says an angel. We see that even in the burning bush incident. Okay? I'm not going to go back to it right now. But basically, God, when it says God is going before them, or sometimes when it says God spoke, it really means an angel, right? That's why we have that really Moshe was the only prophet who communicated with God face to face. Okay, there was no intermediary. God didn't appear to him in dreams. He didn't use angels to speak to him, although sometimes he did. But later on, at least in their relationship, he's speaking to them face to face as a person speaks to his friend. But generally, when it says God is speaking, or God is saying, or God is doing, it often means an angel. Okay, and that's what we see here. And let's just keep this in mind again. Whenever we see God saying, speaking, doing, and then a couple of verses later, or in another retelling of the story, it speaks about an angel, there's no contradiction there. It just implies that when God is doing it, it's really being done all the time through an angel. Okay, all right. So so that's what we see here, right? Okay, verse 20. So now this angel that is ostensibly in the pillar of cloud, which means it's daytime, because if the pillar of cloud is out, it's daytime, because at night is the pillar of fire. Verse 20, Yavo ben Machane Mitzrayim ben Machane Israel. So it goes to the back. So remember, Israel's facing the sea. They're pressed up against the Red Sea. And the Egyptians are coming in at them. The Egyptians are thinking, we got them this time. There's nowhere they can go, right? There's nothing they can do, right? They're stuck. They're pressed up against the sea. So now the Amud Ha'anan, the pillar of cloud, and the angel go to the back. That means now they're going to be interceding. They're going to be in the space between, or they're going to be in between the camp of Israel, pressed up against the sea, and the camp of Egypt. And that's what it says right here. Okay? Ben Machane Mitzrayim, Ben Machane Israel, between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. V'ya'anan v'achoshech v'ya'er et halayla v'lo karav ze el ze kol halayla. So literally what it says here is Vayhi ha'anan v'hachoshech. So there was the cloud and the darkness. V'ya'er et halayla, and it lit up the sky, it lit up the night. So this is a difficult verse to interpret once again, but most of the commentators, and we could maybe look at one or two of them, and the way I understand this is, so it says there was the cloud and the darkness. So darkness on the side of Egypt, and the cloud, which now became the pillar of fire at night, was lighting up the side of the Israelites. So the Israelite side was able to see from the pillar of fire, but on the Egyptian side there was darkness. Okay, let's get a little bit of commentary on this one. So this is verse 20. We'll start with our old friend Robert Alter. This clause is ambiguous, especially because the antecedent would have to be the pillar of cloud, which does not give off light. Right, exactly. But I think it implies that at night it's going to turn into a pillar of fire. Perhaps one might view these words as a telescoping of a temporal shift. The Egyptians approached the Israelites, were clearly in full view in daylight. Perhaps one may infer in the late afternoon. The pillar of cloud swings around from the Israelite front to rear in order to form a barrier between the Hebrews and the Egyptians. As night falls, the pillar of cloud, and there was cloud, in response to the gathering darkness, and the dark turns into fire and lit up the night. That's pretty much what I think. But I think he's saying something slightly different. So maybe what he's saying is something different that actually even makes more sense. One second. Let me reread this. So the cloud was there, meaning between the two camps. And when it became dark, and then it lit up the night. So maybe that's what it means. So I'd always assume that it means there was darkness on the side of the Egyptians, but it lit up the side of the Israelites, because that's what I learned in yeshiva many years ago. So unfortunately, and there's no way of getting all of the thoughts that were implanted in my brain by the rabbis out of my head. And quite frankly, I don't want to. There's some good things the rabbis say, not many, but some. And but okay, I think what Robert Alter is saying is that it's saying v'hachoshech. In other words, it became dark. Okay, which would definitely be a biblical Hebrew way of saying it. And there was such and such. And now now the implication here is it changes to the pillar of fire, and it lit up the night. So maybe on both sides, right? But because it was lighting up on both sides, and there was this pillar of fire in between, and one could not and one could not come close to the other one the entire night. In other words, the Egyptian and the Israelite camps were separated by this pillar of fire. Okay. Right. Let's take a look at Ibn Ezra on that one. So this is 1420. So I'm a huge fan of the Ibn Ezra. He's an amazing, amazing commentator. Amazing. It blows me away. I don't know how he was able to have the depth of knowledge at his hands that he did without the use of a computer. Quite frankly, it still blows me away, because he seems to have like almost an encyclopedic knowledge. I think there were some books I remember reading. There were some, I don't know if it was concordance, but some kind of books or techniques that he used that he had taken from the Muslims which he interacted with. So Ibn Ezra lived in Spain, I believe. I'm sure. Okay, where were we? No, Ibn Ezra, Exodus. So we've got to go to 1420. Okay. The angel of God, I'll just read the English to save some time here. The references to the great prince. Right. So he's talking about Michael, who's mentioned as the prince in the book of Daniel, who goes in the cloud, concerning whom it is written, and the Lord went before them by day. When this angel who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them, the pillar of cloud moved with him. Let the one who identifies the angel of God with the cloud show us where we find the pillar of cloud called the angel of God. So he's okay. So he's basically saying that the pillar itself, the pillar of cloud, was not an angel of God. I agree with that. That there was an angel inside, maybe not inside, but next to it, around it. But the pillar of cloud is not the angel. Furthermore, if the angel and the pillar are one and the same, why is and the pillar of cloud removed from before them repeated? I'm not sure what he's talking about there. I think he's saying that it says the angel and then it says the pillar of cloud, right? If he should answer that Scripture repeats the same idea in different words, then we respond that it's not the manner of Scripture to repeat itself except in prophecy or reproof. Moreover, it is unfit to repeat oneself when reporting how something happened. So he's saying that basically that this is just descriptive and it can't be repetition. So I think what he's talking about, if I'm understanding him correctly, is that it's the repetition that he's referring to, or the verses or the words that people might incorrectly interpret as repetition are that the angel went from before the camp of Israel to be behind them, and the pillar of cloud went from before them and went behind them. So he's saying that some people may understand that as repetition of the same idea. Okay. And he's debunking that idea and saying instead that what's really going on is there were two different things. He's basically, this entire thing is him trying to prove that the pillar of cloud is not itself an angel, or the angel being spoken about. That either the angel was in the pillar of cloud, or near the pillar of cloud or next to the pillar of cloud, but the angel is not the pillar of cloud. Okay, verse 14:20. Yavo ben machane Mitzrayim, uben machane Israel. So, and so this is ambiguous. Vayavo, it came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. So what's the it? Because in the previous verse, we've spoken about two things, the angel and the amud of the pillar of cloud. So Ibn Ezra is saying that the it is referring specifically to the angel. Why? Not sure. Okay, and there's a little comment here. The Hebrew reads v'yavo or vayavo, which may mean it and it came or he came, hence Ibn Ezra's comment. Okay, but he's pointing out that the it is referring specifically to the angel and not to the cloud. I would actually not agree with that, because well, maybe so. Now I see his point, because here it might be speaking about the angel, and then here it says Vayhi anan, and so the cloud was there as well, and then it was dark, and then it lit up the night. I see his point, and who am I to argue with the great Ibn Ezra? He's an amazing, meticulous commentator. I have just the highest amount of respect for him. I really do. Unlike Rashi. For fun, let's look at Rashi on that one. Okay. Talking about commentators, Rashi is one of the worst commentators, which is exactly why modern Orthodox Jews love him so much, because they are so out of touch with the true Torah that, of course, they're going to love a commentator that makes no sense. He's like the Jordan Peterson of the 12th century, or whatever century he lived in, right? If you ever listen to this guy, Jordan Peterson, I mean, I could listen to him for 5 minutes. I don't know what the guy's saying. It doesn't make any sense. He just babbles half the time. It sounds like a babbling philosopher, and he talks a good game, but I don't know what the heck the guy's saying. And it's the same with Rashi. Half the time I don't know what the guy's saying. Honestly, he just babbles and makes stuff up, and apparently he's supposed to be interpreting the pshat, but he doesn't interpret the pshat. Most of what he interprets is midrash. He usually regurgitates midrashim a lot of times, and the midrash is far from pshat. It's quite the opposite. It's expositions. It's like stories and expositions and stuff that can be learned out. I won't even say learned out. That can be used where the words of the Torah are used as a basis to create ideas and stories, which, if you're into that, I suppose may have some value, but it's certainly not pshat. Far from it. Okay, so Rashi. Where do we go, Mr. Rashi? Rashi, Exodus. So now we're going to go to the worst Torah commentator ever in the history of all Torah commentators, Mr. Rashi. And I always point out that when I was growing up, I thought Rashi and Rambam were cats, because my grandfather had two cats when I was a kid, and their names were Rambam and Rashi. And my mother's father, was an interesting figure. He was basically a Reformed Jew, like even a communist, but he was kind of a Talmudic scholar, and he actually wrote books. But he named his two cats Rashi and Rambam. So long before I ever knew of Rashi and Rambam as rabbis, I thought they were cats. True story. Okay, Rashi. But I think my grandfather's cat could have written a better commentary than Rabbi Rashi. Okay. Where were we? 1420. Right. Radio. 1420. What does Rashi have to say? Yavo ben machane Mitzrayim. Mashal. I'll just read the English to make it go fast. A parable. It may be compared. it may be compared to one who is proceeding on a journey and his son is walking in front of him. If now brigands come to capture him, son, he takes him away from in front of him and places him behind him. If a wolf then comes behind him, he places him again in front. If brigands come in front and wolves behind him, he places him on his arm and fights against them. Thus did God do for Israel. As it says, I led Ephraim, he took them upon his arms, etc., etc. Okay, all right. It's a nice little story. I mean, it's not Pshat. In fact, explicitly, it's not Pshat. It says Mashal, but it's a cute little story. So what is Rashi saying? What is Rashi thinking? Brigands come, he takes him away from in front and places behind him. Okay, so I guess what he's saying is when the cloud moved between Israel and Egypt, it's like the same as Israel being placed behind the cloud from the perspective of Egypt. So he basically was protecting Israel the way a father would protect his son by placing him behind him when brigands come. Okay, it's a nice little story. Not the worst Rashi I've ever seen in my entire life. Right. So this is where I got my idea from. So it was implanted into my brain as a memory by the rabbis, much like what was that movie? Oh God, it's one of my favorite movies, and I can't remember the name of it. Total Recall, right? With the memory implants, right? So not exactly the same, but the rabbis implanted this idea many years ago into my mind that so it obviously comes from Rashi. I'm not sure where he's getting it from. So there was cloud and darkness to the Egyptians. So the Egyptian side was in the dark, and so illuminated the night for the Israelites and went before them, as was its way to go every night, while the darkness of the cloud was turned towards the Egyptians. So that's where I got that idea from. And now that I read the Ibn Ezra, I realize that the Ibn Ezra is the anti-Rashi, as horrible a commentator on the Torah as Rashi is. The Ibn Ezra is an amazing commentator. And I also realize that this is completely wrong, that the Ibn Ezra's explanation is much better. So thank you, Ibn Ezra, for unimplanting this nonsense from yeshiva from my head and implanting something that makes more sense. So once again, to parse this, and then we'll just move on. So, V'yavo ben Machane Mitzrayim u ben Machane Israel. This is according to Ibn Ezra. V'yavo, so it came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. Who was it? Speaking about the angel. Wahi Anan, and so did the cloud. So the angel came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. Wahi Anan, and so did the cloud. Wa'choshech, and it became dark. Wahi Eret Alayla, and it lit up the sky, meaning the cloud now turned to a pillar of fire and lit up the sky on both sides. And one did not approach the other for the entire night, meaning the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. That's according to the Ibn Ezra's interpretation. Okay. Any questions, any comments before we go on? It's getting late. I'm going to go for another half an hour at the most. And then I'm going to stop. Soon I will switch over to speed to express mode, because we're running out of time and we haven't gotten very far, have we, as usual? But that's just the way it is. Speed mode means I'm just going to read with minimal commentary. We'll go a little bit longer. Wayet Moshe et yado al hayam v'yolech Yahweh et hayam baruach kadim. Azah kol halayla v'yasem et hayam leharava v'yib'aqu hamayim. So Moshe stretched out his hand, which again, remember, when it says he stretched out his hand, he has a staff in his hand. It's almost used interchangeably, right? Because we saw earlier that he had taken the staff. This is a staff that he had already back at the burning bush, right? It's the same staff that's been used throughout the entire. This is his staff that he had when he was shepherding his flock. God knows how many months earlier, year earlier, maybe, something like that, when he was shepherding his flock out towards Sinai, and then Yahweh appeared to him, revealed his eternal name, Yahweh, and showed him the signs that he can do. Okay, meaning throw a staff on the ground, it becomes a snake. Pick the snake up by the tail, and it becomes a staff. Right, that same staff, which was just his simple shepherd staff that he happened to take with him that day when he was shepherding his flock out into the desert, out into the wilderness by Mount Sinai. That staff became the staff that was used for basically all of the plagues, and now is being used here to split the Red Sea. Right? Remember, it wasn't a staff that was given to him by God or anything like that. Right? It was just some stupid stick that he had in his hand that he happened to be, using that day when he was shepherding his flock. Maybe it was a staff that he had, found or made like a year before or 2 years. Who knows, right? But it's kind of interesting that became the staff, right? That became the instrument for doing basically all of the plagues and splitting the Red Sea. And there's another instrument, and we've mentioned this before, and that's the Ruach Kadim Azah. So we've seen this a couple of times. This strong east wind, or this east wind. And I'd like to point out a couple of those times. And then I think after this, we can go into speed mode. That was great. Yeah, when he kills what's her face, that who played it again? Yeah. Consider force, right? What was her name again? I can't remember. The blonde girl, right? You'll remember. Okay. Great movie. One of my favorite movies of all times. So, Ruach Kadim Azah. So, this Ruach Kadim has appeared a number of times. So, without looking at the verses individually, Dakot Shtufot, this is Genesis 41:6. This is speaking about I believe it's grains of corn. Yeah. Or the grains of, it's not corn, it's translated as corn. It means really just wheat. So this is the Pharaoh's dream, right? And we had the fat ears of grain, the fat grain seeds, that were then swallowed by was it swallowed? No, for some reason I can't remember. At any rate, by the thin grain seeds, and it says that those grains were dakot shtufot kadim. Okay, they were thin, and they were blasted by the kadim, by the east wind. Okay, so the thin grains in Pharaoh's dream were blasted by the east wind. That's the same here. This is all part of Pharaoh's dream. Now we have in Exodus 10:13. We have again nihag ruach kadim be'eretz kol. Let's go look at this verse for a second. Okay, so this is the plague of the locusts, and they were brought in by this ruach kadim. Okay, so this east wind brought in the locusts. That was the eighth plague, was the locusts. Eighth, I believe the eighth plague. Okay. And now we have here in Exodus 14:21 that this east wind is splitting the Red Sea, the Sea of Reeds. Okay, so 3 instances of the east wind. Okay, and we know the east wind, right? Those of us who live or have lived in Israel know that the east wind, right? It's like the Hamsin. The Hamsin comes in I think it's the spring and late summer, and it's this east wind that comes off of the desert, basically I think out of Saudi Arabia or maybe out of Jordan and Iraq, and it brings with it dust and basically dry, hot, dusty air. And if you've lived through it, it's like fog almost. It's very hard to see. The air looks like this kind of like brownish, reddish hue. and you feel the dust in the air, and you feel the strong dry wind. It's very unpleasant, and it can last sometimes a day, 2, 3, maybe even up to a week. And I think it's usually, if I remember correctly, the last time I think it's usually in the late summer, like August or September or something like that. In the Hamsin. And Hamsin means 50 in Arabic because it lasts for a total of 50 days. But I think the original Hamsin maybe is in Morocco or something like that and lasts for 50 days. I don't know. I'd have to look it up again. At any rate, it's the same idea. This east wind. So if you're talking about the land of Israel, right, or even where the Israelites are right now, at the Red Sea, the east to the east is all desert. It's Saudi Arabia, it's the Sinai Peninsula, right? If you look at the map, right, this is all desert. So if the wind comes from the east, it's going to bring in that dry desert, dusty air, and that's what we see here. So that's the east wind, right? So the east wind is mentioned 3 times, twice in the book of Genesis, or with 2 stories associated with the book of Genesis: the thin grains of wheat in Pharaoh's dream, the wind, the east wind that blew in the locusts for the 8th plague, and now the east wind that is splitting the Red Sea. So it's interesting, right? Because the Red Sea is if it's coming in from the east, it's kind of splitting the sea from the east, right? We kind of think of it in the other direction, like blowing from behind the Israelites out towards the east and splitting the Red Sea like this, but it's really coming from the opposite direction, right? It's coming in towards the Israelites from where they are. And so it's going to split the sea, I guess, from east to west. And the Israelites are on the western shore of the Red Sea. So it's almost like it's going to get to them. The splitting is going to get to them last, right? It's going to start on the opposite coast, and when it's done splitting, then their side will see the split. Okay, and then it's also mentioned in Job, in Psalms, Isaiah, Jeremiah. So it's mentioned many times. Ezekiel, right? If we had a bit more time, I'd just pick one at random. Let's pick one at random. How about Ezekiel 7:10, 17:10? הנה, שתולה התצלח, הלא כי געת ברוח הקדים ותיבש, יבש על ערוגות שמחה tibash. So behold, shtulat titzlach, that which is planted, will it succeed? Will it be successful? Haloki ga'at baruach kadim, is it not that when the east wind touches it or blasts it, tibash yavesh, it will certainly dry up? And again, here we have repetition, tibash yavesh. Repetition means emphasis. The English translation, they deal with that emphasis by saying utterly wither. Okay? Al arugot timcha tibash. On the arugot is like a garden, or like a I don't know how to explain it. Let's see what the BDB says. Garden, terrace, or bed. So basically, in the green place where it's growing, it will still dry up. Arugot simcha. Okay, on the garden of plants, it will dry up. Meaning, in its very place where it was, even though that was a wet garden, it will still dry up when the east wind blasts it. Okay, and what is this referring to? So let's read in the English for a second. The word of Yahweh came to me, son of man, set forth an allegory and tell it to the Israelites as a parable. Say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says: a great eagle with powerful wings, long feathers, and full plumage of various colors came to Lebanon. Taking hold of the top of a cedar, he broke off its topmost shoot and carried it away to a land of merchants, where he planted it in a city of traders. He took one of the seedlings of the land and put it in the fertile soil. He planted it like a willow by abundant water, and and it sprouted and became a low spreading vine. Its branches turned towards him, but its roots remained under it, so it became a vine and produced branches and put out leafy boughs. But there was another great eagle with powerful wings and full of plumage. The vine now sent out its roots towards him from the plot where it was planted and stretched out its branches to him for water. It had been planted in good soil by abundant water so that it would produce branches, bear fruit, and become a splendid vine, talking about Israel, right? What God did for Israel. Say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Will it thrive? Will it not be uprooted and stripped of its fruit so it withers? All its new growth will wither. It will not take a strong arm or many people to pull it up by the roots. It has been planted, but will it thrive? Will it not wither completely when the east wind strikes it? Wither away in the plot where it grew. Then the word of the Lord came to me. Say to this to the rebellious people, do you not know what these things mean? Say to them, the king of Babylon went to Jerusalem, carried off her king and her nobles, bringing them back with him to Babylon. Then he took a member of the royal family, etc., etc. So this is a prophecy against Israel, right? But the king rebelled against him by sending his envoys to Egypt to get horses and a large army. Will he succeed? Will he who does such things escape? So this is speaking about, is it Tzidkiyahu, I believe, if I'm not mistaken? One of the last kings of Egypt, of Israel, when the Babylonians came. Okay, let's get back to where we were. So וישם את הים לחרביו ויבקעו המים. Where's Levi? Where? Underneath?
No.
Oh, okay. And the water split. ויבואו בני ישראל בתוך הים ביבשה והמים להם חומה מימינם ושמאלם. And the children of Israel literally came, came into the water or into the sea on dry land, and the water was for them a wall to their left and to their right. So now I'm going to go into express mode because we're running out of time. In fact, I'm going to stop in another 10 minutes, no matter what we get to. וירדפו מצרים יבואו אחריהם, and Egypt chased them and came after them. כל סוס פרעה ורכבו ופרשיו אל תוך הים. All of the horses of Pharaoh and his chariots and his horsemen into the sea. So they were basically enticed, right? Their stubborn hearts now are going to lead to their deaths, right? Because they're being enticed into the sea, right? They're like, oh, it's dry land, right? Let's go after them, right? It's a trap. God is setting a trap for them. Verse 24. Waihi bi'ashmoret haboker. Oh, there's a lot I could say about that. This ashmoret haboker. So there are three. This means the morning watch. It's basically the third of the night. So the night can be divided into three parts. Okay. There's the Ashmoret. The first one is, I can't remember now the names. I'd have to look it up again. I think Ashmoret Laila, Ashmoret Chatzot, and Ashmoret Boker, but I'll have to look it up. At any rate, there are three what are called watches, and the night is divided up into three sections. So if we were to take the night, so let's take, I don't want to I'll be talking about this for an hour, but very, very briefly, okay? Let's assume we're in one of the equinoxes, like the vernal or the autumnal equinox. Equinox means equinox, equa means the same, like equal, or equity, a nice big word we hear these days a lot. And nox is the Latin word for night. So equinox means same night, or same, night is the same. So it means when the day and the night are exactly the same length. That's what happens at the two equinoxes, at the vernal and the autumnal equinox, okay? At that time, however you want to, well, if you divide, we'll just go by hours, okay? That means that the night is going to be 12 hours long and the day is going to be 12 hours long, exactly at the equinoxes, no matter where you are on the face of the earth, with the exception of being exactly at the poles. And at that point, what you're actually going to see is the sun is going to be half above the horizon, half below the horizon. Anyway, I digress. The point is that if you take the 12 hours of the night, you can divide them up into 3 sections of 4 hours each. So let's say the sun sets, and it will, okay, at any point on the earth, on one of the equinoxes, it will set at, well, we can't exactly say 6 o'clock because it depends on where you are in a time zone and all this kind of stuff. But let's say it sets at 6 o'clock. It's going to set at around 6, no matter where you are on the face of the earth. Okay. So, but let's say the sun sets at exactly 6 o'clock, meaning at 6 o'clock, the face of the sun dips below the horizon. Okay. The next morning, aside from a few seconds difference, it will rise at exactly 6 a.m. Okay. So you have 12 hours of darkness. If you take those 12 hours, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., divide them into 3 sections, you have 6 to 10, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., and then 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. Those are the 3 watches of the night. The Ashmorta, I think the first one, I have to look it up again. It escapes me. I think the first one is called Ashmorta Laila. No, the first one is probably called Ashmorta Erev. I don't know. I don't remember. But the first one, we'll call it the first one, okay, is 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Then you have the middle one, which is 10 p.m. to 2 p.m. Right in the middle of that, you have 12 midnight. That's when the Israelites were freed from, or when God came and destroyed the Egyptian firstborn, which we read about earlier in Exodus chapter 12. And then you have the last 3 hours of the night, and that's Ashmorta Boker. The last 4 hours of the night. That's 2 p.m. to 6 a.m. And then at 6 a.m., the disk of the sun peaks above the horizon. Okay. So Ashmorta Boker is these last 4 hours of the night. It's basically, we're talking about is basically, to simplify it, 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. So it was in the Ashmorta Boker, Wayashkef Yahweh el Machane Mitzrayim, that God looked out into the camp of Egypt, Ba'amud Esh, through the pillar of fire. So what does that mean? God looked out into the camp of Egypt from the pillar of fire. Okay. Well, we know that God and angel of God, Malach Yahweh, are often interchangeable. We know that the angel traveled to the back of the camp. We saw that earlier. We spoke about that extensively, right? With the pillar of cloud. So maybe we can learn from this that the angel was actually inside the pillar of cloud and inside the pillar of fire. And then when it says here that God, that Yahweh looked out through the pillar of fire into the camp of Egypt, it's really speaking about this Malach Yahweh, this angel of God, because once again, Yahweh and Malach Yahweh are often used interchangeably, and it's looking out upon the camp of Egypt. Okay. Ba'amud Esh ve'anan, Machane Mitzrayim ba'amud Esh ve'anan, Yahamet Machane Mitzrayim. I just wanted to see one thing here. Verse 24. Let's see how Robert also deals with that one. Okay, a pillar of fire and cloud. Okay, so maybe day has already come, or maybe now the fire is changing back to the pillar of cloud. Not sure. Not going to look into it right now. At any rate, Yahamet Machane Mitzrayim. Yaham is amazed or mesmerized, shall we say. Let's see how they translate it here. Troubled. At Machane Mitzrayim, troubled the camp of Egypt. Verse 25. We saw it at Ofen, Markovotao, wa yin ha-rehu bekvedut, wa yomer Mitzrayim anusa mipnei Yisrael, ki Yahweh nilham lahem b'Mitzrayim. And he took off, meaning God removed the wheels from his chariots, from Markovotav, from Pharaoh's chariots, and they had trouble driving them. Literally, they drove them with heaviness. And Egypt said, Anus, let's flee, let's turn back, let's retreat before Israel, because Yahweh is most certainly nilcham lahem. I'm sorry, it's not a double. Nilcham lahem b'Mitzrayim, because God is fighting for them against Egypt. Okay. Verse 26. ויאמר יהוה אל משה נטה את ידך Alayam. So again, stretch your hand out onto the sea. So first time Moshe stretched his hand out onto the sea. And again, the hand really means the hand with the staff in it, that shepherd's staff that he had from way back when. Alayam yashuvu hamayim al Misraim al rikhvo al parashao. So basically stretch your hand out and the waters will return upon Egypt, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen. Verse 27. So the staff is being used to split the waters, and now it's being used to return the waters. Wayet Moshe et yado al hayam wa yashav hayam lifnot boker le'itnano. So Moshe stretched out his hand, meaning again the staff upon the sea. Wa yashav hayam lifnot boker, and the sea returned lifnot boker, right before the morning, or as at dawn, or as the sun was rising, or right before the sun rose, right? So again, we saw this was Ashmura Shlishit. It was the third watch, 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. Sun rises in our idealized situation here at 6 a.m. So right before the sun rose, the sea returned, right? So this was all happening between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. in the idealized situation, that the sea was split and then it was returned. So we know that this all happened within a space of 4 hours, okay, at the most. Le'etano, to its former strength, or to its strength. Umitzrayim nasim likrato. And Egypt tried to flee, or to turn back towards it. In other words, they saw the waters returning, and they tried to run away, right? So they tried to run back. One would guess to the western shore of the Red Sea. And God shook Egypt in the sea. Maybe a better translation than shook. What do they say here? Overthrew. Lina'er in modern Hebrew means to shake. Let's try to get a translation here. Shake out or off. Shake. So shook, yeah, shook them. Good enough. Verse 28. וישוב המים ויכסו את הרכב ואת הפרשים לכל חיל פרעה הם באים אחריהם בים לא נשאר בהם עד אחד. So the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen. לכל חיל פרעה, in fact, all of the army of Pharaoh, haba'im achareim, that had come after them, meaning after the Israelites, bayam, and so covered them in the sea, or with the sea. Lo nishar b'hem ad echad, not a single one remained. Uvenei Yisrael halchu b'yabasha b'toch hayam v'hamayim lahem choma b'yaminam u'mismolam. And the children of Israel went b'yabasha, on the dry land. B'toch hayam v'hamayim lahem choma b'yaminam u'mismolam, within the sea, and the water was for them a wall on their right and on their left. I'll just point out, Yabasha is one of the things that is created in Genesis 1, right? Let's just see that for one split second. So on the third day, right? I'll just read this verse. Wayomer Elohim yikavu hamayim mitachat hashamayim, let the waters that are underneath the heavens, meaning on earth, gather together. El makom echad, to one place, meaning the seas. V'tereh yabasha wayichen, and let dry land appear. So one of the things that was created was dry land. Is this a reference back to that? In a sense, is God doing like a little mini creation here, creating dry land out of the sea, and in so referring back to these acts of creation that He did in Genesis 1? I don't know. All I could say is the Torah is often very self-referential, so it wouldn't surprise me if it does. I wouldn't surprise me if some of the commentators pick up on that, but on the other hand, not necessarily. Just thought I'd point that out. Verse 30, and I'm going to end in just a minute. And Yahweh saved Israel from the hand of Egypt on that day. Again, here we have our verb, what yasha, related to the Christian not mine in any way, shape, or form. God, Yeshua, or Jesus. Just pointing that out because I know some people do come from a Christian background. I don't. Never have, never will. Mitzrayim yar Yisrael et Mitzrayim met asfat hayam. And Israel saw Egypt dead on the seashore. That was it. The end of Egypt. Why yar Yisrael et yad hagedolah asher asa Yahweh b'Mitzrayim. And Israel saw the mighty hand which Yahweh had wielded against Egypt. Why yir'u ha'am et Yahweh. And the people of Israel feared Yahweh, or were in reverence of Yahweh, Yaminu bi Yahweh, and they believed in Yahweh, Moshe Abdo, and in Moshe, his servant. It's interesting. This might be the first time that Moshe is called the servant of God, right? But it's interesting that the Israelites were all servants in Egypt, okay? And now they're free, and they're basically servants of God, right? And Moshe is the primary. He's the head of the nation, but that makes him the primary servant. He's, the quintessential servant of God. So again, it might be picking up on this idea purposely, since the Torah is very self-referential, as I always like to point out. But what's interesting here is earlier it said that this was all done so that Egypt can see the power of God. Well, they saw the power of God and then they died. That was the end of them. That was the last thing they saw before they descended down into their, whatever the Egyptian Book of the Dead tells them they're going to, getting their hearts weighed on a scale, right, against the feather and other fun stuff like that. But now Israel's left, and now the focus switches to Israel, recognizing the power and the salvation of Yahweh, right? Verse 31. So it's not Egypt anymore. Yad Yisrael et yad hagedolah asher asa Yahweh. So Israel saw the strong hand that Yahweh had wielded against Egypt. And Israel, the people of Israel, the people feared him, or feared Yahweh, and they believed in Yahweh and in Moshe, his servant. And with that, we're going to end today's study. It's been over 3 hours. Here's Shirat Hayam. I will just point out one thing very, very quickly. Az Yashir Moshe b'nei Israel. I've heard too many rabbis incorrectly and stupidly state that this verb yashir is in the future. It's not. Okay, we have this idea of the vav hipuch, the conversive vav. When you have a vav before a verb, then it changes the tense. So really, in Hebrew, they always say there are no real past and future; that it's imperfect and perfect. But if the imperfect is just left alone, it implies the future. Okay, but you can change that imperfect, meaning it was happening in the past, to a past by putting a vav before it. There's no vav before it, but what there is a az. So az yashir, Moshe. The az takes the place of the vav, and we see this in a number of verses in the Torah where you can have instead of vav, you have other words such as az or ki, which take the place of the vav, but they cause the same effect. They change the past to the future. They change the future to the past, and that's exactly what's happening here. So if you hear any rabbi making some long, dumb, stupid drash on the fact that Az Yashir, meaning then Moshe will sing, and the children of Israel will sing the song because Yashir is in the future, then you should immediately know that they do not understand Hebrew grammar, biblical Hebrew grammar at all, because the Az is changing it to the past tense, or it's changing it from the imperfect to the perfect, taking the place of the Vav Hipuch. If you didn't understand what I was saying there, no big deal. When you learn Hebrew grammar, then that will become more meaningful. And I encourage everyone to go ahead and learn biblical and or modern Hebrew. It will change your lives in terms of understanding the Torah. If you're reading a translation is interpretation. You're reading someone else's interpretation. And a lot of times, not a lot of times, every single time you're reading it, probably including mine, there's an agenda. Okay? What is my agenda? My agenda is to try to understand the Torah as best as possible. But it's still an agenda, and I'm certainly influenced by we saw even before that I was influenced by ideas that had been implanted into me by the rabbis from my years in yeshiva, and I'm certainly sure I'm influenced by how my own worldview, things that have happened to me in my life, my own way, my own unique, specific way of seeing the world, as we all are. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that my translation is, in a sense, my interpretation. So the only way to get your own interpretation, to really understand the Torah, is to go ahead and learn and understand biblical Hebrew as best you can. It will change your life. It will change your understanding of the Tanakh. Okay, with that being said, we're going to end it here. Are there any questions or comments? This is the last chance. Anybody? No? Alrighty then. So I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to wish everybody Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov, depending on where you are in the world. We'll put on a little music to go out. And Be'ezarat Yahweh, I will see you all next week. Please tell your friends about the study. If you don't have any friends, tell your enemies. If you don't have enemies, tell your frenemies. And let's make this study grow, because I think it's important to have good Karaite studies out there. So thank you, Ricky, April. Thank you, Yanana, Miknana, Banana, and Yardain, and all my other friends. Good seeing you. Talk to you all hopefully during the week. Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov. I'm going to put on some music.
Adur na'e tziva olam nafshi cholat ahabatecha oy ana kelna oy refana la harot la noam zivecha תחזק ותתרפא והייתה לה שמחת עולם ועתיק ימונה רחמך וחוסנה על בן אהובך אוי כי זה כמה נכסוף נחשפתי אות מהרה בתפארת עוזך אלך חמדה ליבי וחוסנה ואל תתעלם יגלנה ופרוס חביבי עליי את סוכת שלומך אוי תאיר ארץ בלי כבודך נגילה ונשמחה לאהוב כי במועד וכוננו כימי עולם וכוננו כימי עולם